This program is brought to you by cable franchise fees and generous donations from viewers like you.
I see a presence of a quorum, so I'm calling to order this meeting of the Amherst School Committee at 6:31 p.m. on Tuesday, December 14th. We will, when I call your name, if you could please state present. Mr. Demling.
Demling present.
Mr. Harrington.
Harrington present.
Ms. Spitzer.
Spitzer present.
McDonald present, and I see Ms. Lord.
Lord present.
Excellent. We are so our first, we have a lot of folks that are joining us, and so just as you join, if you I believe you're automatically muted. If you can also turn off your camera unless you're a member of the Amherst School Committee, that helps us to be able to track who's in the meeting right now. Thank you. Our first order of business is to approve minutes. So we have two sets of minutes in our agenda packet. We have minutes from the budget forum that we had a week ago on December 9th. Are there any edits or revisions requested? Seeing none, I will move that we approve the minutes of December 9th. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by McDonald, seconded by Spitzer. And we'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Demling?
Demling, aye.
Mr. Harrington?
Harrington, aye.
Ms. Lord?
Lord, aye.
Ms. Spitzer?
Spitzer, aye.
And McDonald, aye. The motion passes unanimously. Next is public comment, and I just have a couple comments. This meeting is a meeting of the Amherst Elementary School Committee. Any comments are welcome at any time, but just know that for this particular evening, this group is our business is with the elementary schools in Amherst and not the regional schools. That meeting is on Tuesday of next week. Also, this is, I think there may have been some confusion in the community. Tonight's meeting is not a public forum. So any of our guests and visitors from members of the public that are joining us in this live meeting, welcome. And if you would like to share any comments about any of the items on our agenda, now is the time to do so. I will say that we do not have any written or recorded voice messages to share. So I will welcome anybody who would like to make a public comment who's in this meeting right now. To do so, I ask that you use the raise hand feature to indicate and request to speak. If you do that, you can do that whenever if other folks are speaking, it will put you in the queue in the order in which it was clicked. And for folks new to Google Meet, the raise hand feature is the little, at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a row of icons, and right in the middle is a little hand. And if you click on that, that will notify us that you wish to speak. Stephanie Hockman, you are welcome to unmute and speak. You have 3 minutes.
Correction, I am using my wife's Google Meet, so it's actually Chris Hockman.
Oh.
And so I apologize for that, for my deficiency in knowing how to properly put my identity on there. I prepared to look at this meeting today, looking for minutes so I can learn how to review the minutes for previous meetings. The agenda item details for this meeting only includes the ASC budget forum and not previous minutes. There's only one visible PDF in there, and I couldn't see the other PDF. I think you approved minutes for a previous meeting based on it existing inside of the agenda items, but that's not visible to the public. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. For this evening, we only approved one set of minutes, and I'm just answering this as a procedural question. Normally, we don't respond as a Q&A in public comment, but with our new board docs, it's been a topic of conversation. To find the previous minutes for a previous meeting, the simplest way to do that is to go actually to that meeting listing in board docs. So clicking on meetings on the top of that screen, and going to the full list of 2021 meetings, click on the meeting, the specific meeting date that in question that you're looking for those minutes, and you'll see that right on that first sort of page of that particular meeting. Meeting minutes that have been approved will show up there. If they have not yet been approved, voted on by the school committee, they won't show there until they are approved. Are there other comments? I'm not seeing any. So last call. Great. So the public comment period is now closed, and we will move on to our next item, which is superintendent's update. For that, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Morris.
Thank you, Chair McDonald, and I'll be brief because we do have a number of other topics like health and safety updates, where a lot of things that I might talk about in superintendent updates will be an agenda item. So, I just want to note that we're trialing this out. We did it at a budget forum last week with opening up the Google Meet. This came as kind of an interest from the public, and I think we had some tweaks to make, but I'm glad that people are able to enter the meetings this time, and I think we'll kind of evaluate how it's going. But I just wanted to really appreciate both Maylene, our minute taker, who is taking on some additional responsibilities as it relates to running the tech side of this meeting, as well as the committee to see how this goes and it works. But I just wanted to note that many people have been working on this behind the scenes, and we had some challenges, tech challenges to work out, and I think we've resolved them for the most part. So we'll see how it goes. Just second thing I wanted to mention is we've had two now in a 3-part speaker series on equity and diversity. And so we had Dr. Cornell West 2 Wednesdays ago. Again, I think I mentioned this in another meeting. One of my professional highlights of the last couple of years was being able to spend time with Dr. West, and that was really well received. This week we have someone who's involved in mental health and youth, currently someone who works in Holyoke, and that's tomorrow night. I'm unable to do that one. I'll be at getting ready for another committee meeting that I have tomorrow night. But Jen Ortiz from our HR office will be facilitating that, and that was shared in the newsletter last week. So we're really pleased to be able to bring that series, especially as it's pretty dark at 5 o'clock. Not always the nicest time of year to go out. So we're able to provide some additional resources. And thanks to Doreen Cunningham for her work in that dimension. The last thing you may hear from your children, if you're a family member or caregiver watching this, is we've put out a number of our elementary educators have been using headsets with microphones to make sure, given masking and other matters, to make sure their voice projects. They were very popular, and as more staff are using them, we put a call out to all staff members at, in this case, the elementary level. And a number of folks took us up on that, and so we were able to provide those or order those. They're coming very soon. I think they are here to provide those for our staff members. We know it's hard to teach in a mask all day in terms of voice projection and how much people going home with sore throats and things that we want to avoid. So appreciate Jerry. The other thing that you may have seen in the news today is a critical security patch in a software program. Other people, Mr. Demling included, might be able to describe what's going on, but it certainly was headline news. And we did have one server that was using that software system, which many people use around the world, and it was patched today. So we are, our data is secure, and appreciate Jerry's quick response to that emerging challenge as well. If this year is anything, right, emerging challenges that are unexpected come around all the time, and really appreciate people on our team to be able to do that. Since we last met, we had our second shot clinics at each of the 3 elementary schools, which were really well received and well appreciated. And we had a couple kids who were out at the Crocker Farm one on Tuesday, and they were back in school by Friday, so we were able to get them to Fort River and make sure they got their second shot. But our staff was outstanding. Our students were brave and wonderful, and we were able to really appreciating to be able to offer that service. This afternoon we also had our second shot clinic. This was a separate one that was located at the high school, and so we had 39 students from Amherst and Pelham elementary schools who got their second shots, who had gotten their first shots the Tuesday before the Thanksgiving recess, as well as a number of people in our community who did booster shots today, because we had staff members, but we also opened up seats to many members of our community who were able to come in. So we'll talk more about those when we get to health and safety, but I believe that is my relatively brief update for this evening.
Oops, clicked too many times. Please let me know if I'm laggy. On my end, it still looks laggy, but please alert me if that's the case. Any questions for the superintendent from the school committee? No? Okay. Moving next to the chair's update, I have two things. The town of Amherst, Sean Mangano from the town of Amherst is pulling together a budget coordinating group. We've had this in past years. That group was supposed to meet yesterday, then was supposed to meet tomorrow, and now is being rescheduled. So I can't report as to when that meeting will be, but Vice Chair Mr. Demling and myself will serve as representatives for the Amherst School Committee on that group. That includes representatives from the Library Board of Trustees, as well as the Town Council and Finance Committee. We have not seen an agenda, so I can't report about the topics of the next meeting, but as soon as I do, I will alert the school committee about that. The only other item is an expression of gratitude. Tonight is the last meeting of of 2 of our members for the Amherst School Committee. They're not done yet with their service, but Ms. Spitzer and Ms. Lord are both leaving us at the beginning of January. But this is their last meeting with the Amherst School Committee, and I want to just express my sincerest gratitude, and it's just been an honor to work with you both through this super intensive term that we've had. It's been only 2 years, but feels like probably 4, the number of times that we've worked together. And each of you in your own way have made the work on this committee and during this really intense period really rewarding, and just a joyful experience in terms of how a group can work and collaborate together to get things done for the good of our community. So I thank you for all the hours, all the heartache and headaches that you've endured throughout this all. And I hope that you will stay engaged and that we will see you supporting and working with us as we proceed into the future. Thank you. Dr. Morris.
I will make comments about Ms. Lord and Ms. Spitzer and appreciate them. I'll do it next week. So that wasn't actually awkward segue, but I did leave out one part of my superintendent update. So none of this is nothing negative about Ms. Lord and Ms. Spitzer, but I'll save some comments for next week, which is that today, and I see Sean getting on, which prompted me, is that we did have a meeting. The town with their ARPA funds is looking at, with us, we've worked together with the town to identify the real need around early childhood slots and who gets services and who has structured preschool or 0 to 3 services and not. And at our request, the town did partner with us on that matter in terms of their ARPA funds. And so we did have a meeting with Kristen Hayes, who many of you remember from doing multiple reports for us. Elizabeth Burns, our preschool director, was present, as well as Mr. Mangano and some people from the town, to try to brainstorm, what's going on in Washington, D.C. with the Build Better, I'm going to mess up the title, but the act that's being discussed in the Senate right now and potential. So it was a really generative conversation. I know it's a topic that's come up over the last couple years. It wasn't we've got it all figured out. That wasn't the point of the meeting. It was really a brainstorming meeting. But I appreciate the town's support of exploring multiple options for our young children, particularly our young children in historically disadvantaged groups. And, I'll come back as that process develops to come up with what's going on in Washington, D.C. There's some developments at the state level as well that could influence that conversation, as well as the ARPA funds. So a whole lot of moving pieces, but just want to appreciate Director Burns and the town for continuing to not forget about our youngest students and the impact that the services they receive at that young age filter through our system, not just when they're young kids, but, I think evidence would show that has influences throughout their schooling experience altogether. So my apologies, it was in my notes, but it was below my notes, and I'm not in my office tonight, and one screen is giving me a hard time. But I just wanted to update the committee, and I'll come back as that develops, perhaps as an agenda item at some point to share that in more detail. But my apologies for the mistimed final superintendent update comment.
Thank you. And I won't call you out of order for going back on the agenda either. Ms. Lord. You're muted. There you go.
I'm sorry, that was premature. It was in anticipation of other school committee announcements.
I was just going to move on to that. So moving on to school committee announcements, Ms. Lord.
Thank you. I wanted to gratefully and happily announce that tomorrow from 6 to 8, we will have a school equity advisory committee meeting, and it is on the district calendar. You can find the link and the meeting materials there. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Spitzer. You're muted still.
Thank you. I wanted to have a moment to just make a couple comments, given that this is my last Amherst School Committee meeting. I know I'll see you all, a week at the regional meeting, but things are a little different across the two regions. So it's funny because I first decided to run for school committee way back when I, moved back to town and learned about the issue with the school building project. And I was, committed to making sure that Wildwood and Fort River are going to be, renovated or replaced. So it's really nice to have on my last meeting, at least on the agenda, where we're talking about the school project date. So that is really satisfying. I have to say, just express my gratitude and appreciation for everybody who I've worked with over the years. This is the end of my second term. And I think, when I first ran, I found out a couple of days later that I was expecting my third child. And so I managed to make it through that first term, with a newborn, 3 kids, all young. And I thought, well, if I can do that, I can do anything. So I'll just run again and it's going to get easier. And of course, what happened? But I got to serve on school committee during a pandemic. So I want to I can't think of a better group of people to have served with, and including, the superintendent and everybody on this committee. And I just want to say, I think moving forward, I'm the only one right now on the committee with this kid in our district. I mean, I think Dr. Morris does too, but I can find ways to try to get the voices of those with young children into these meetings, because I think it's super challenging to serve when you have young children. This meeting is always conflicting with their bedtimes, and especially now serving from home, they're sometimes even just pounding on the door, reminding me that they're home. So anyways, I just want to say thank you to everybody. Let's keep thinking about the ways that we can make sure that we're really inclusive and get to hear from the families in our district. It's nice to see so many folks tuning in tonight, and don't worry, I will continue to be involved. I want to make sure that my little ones can actually be, working or learning in the buildings that we're hopefully going to be learning more about tonight. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Are there any other announcements from the school committee? Seeing none, we'll move on to our next item.
I'm sorry, Ms. McDonald. I believe Mr. Demling's hand was up. I could be mistaken, but I believe I saw it.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Demling.
Sorry, I'll have to get used to the new mode here. Yeah, I mean, I'm so terrible at goodbyes, but since we have a nice Amherst crowd here, I thought I would take the opportunity. It's not possible to articulate the individual contributions that Ms. Spitzer and Ms. Lord have made over the years to our committee, and I think one of the things that's most revealing when you're on this side of the screen is how much work goes into making our district a better place and making this a better place for our kids. That doesn't happen at the meetings. This is like, one slice of the work of the committee, and commenting on items and motions and whatnot. And it's an important piece for sure. But there's so much work that Ms. Spitzer and Ms. Lord have done for our community that is, you'll just never know about. And it's more than just attending subcommittees and reading documents and whatnot. It's real engagement. And the thing that I admire most, I think, about both Ms. Lord and Ms. Spitzer, and so it's a bit coincidental that they're both cycling up at the same time, is how dedicated they are to engaging with individual members of our community and making that a real key piece of how we do business and how we reflect on what our schools should be doing. And it's work that is just selfless and doesn't get the promotion it deserves. And of course, COVID. I mean, decades from now, I'm sure I will run into you all walking around town, and I will never forget what we went through in COVID. That was trial by a dozen fires at the same time. And so at the end, I could just say thank you for your service. And it's been a real pleasure, and I've been honored to serve with both of you. Thank you.
Thank you. There's no other announcements from the school committee. We can move on to our new and continuing business. And first up, we have our first item is actually a joint meeting, sorry. And I see that Ms. Shane, who is chair of the elementary school building committee, has joined us. So I'm going to look to you, Ms. Shane, if you have a quorum, to call your meeting to order. You'll need to unmute yourself at the bottom of your screen.
Thank you. It's like Zoom, but in a different place. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm, as Allison said, I'm chair of the elementary school building committee. And can you tell me how on Google Meets I see who else is here so I can see whether we have a quorum?
If you click on the lower right, you'll see heads.
Heads. Ah, heads.
When you click on that, it has a little number 23 above it. If you click on that, a little panel will pop out with the names.
Okay.
And Ms. Shane, if you want to see everybody, there is a way where if you would like to, you can do the settings where you can see all 23 people at once. I don't know if that's what you were looking for, or more just
okay, that's what I'm doing. So what I'm going to do is call out the names of the people who are on the school building committee who are not Mike Morris and Ben Harrington, who are also on the school building committee. Just so you know, I'm not positive we have a quorum, but I just we'll introduce them to you by making sure they can hear and be heard. So I'm going to call them in the order I see them on the list. Jonathan Salvin.
Present. Present.
Paul Bockerman.
Present.
Phoebe Merriam.
Present.
Rupert Roy Clark.
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Great. And I think that is all I'm seeing right now. So we are less than a quorum, but if anyone else.
Sean is here.
Oh, I see Sean. Okay, Sean is here. So Sean McNano.
Here.
So why did you not? I just skipped over. So if anyone sees anyone else on the list, just help me out. So I think we are here, and I'm just going to say a few words of introduction. First, I want to thank everyone very much for inviting us to join you tonight on behalf of our entire committee. But I also think it's important that we work jointly as much as possible. So this is the beginning of that effort, and Allison and Mike very graciously organized it for us. Tonight is really the beginning, and I won't take many words to preface it other than to say we are on the path toward a new elementary school. We have a design team in place. We have an owner's project manager, which is a lot of words, Answer and Margaret Wood. And we're joined tonight by Donna Danisco of Danisco Design and her team, who have prepared a presentation. And we talked back and forth where they've arranged for it to be about half the time or a little less to allow plenty of time for questions and answers and back and forth. And this is just the beginning. I see Steve Schreiber has also joined us. Steve, can you hear and be heard? Yes, I think he's here.
So and that gives us a quorum.
And that gives us, so we do have a quorum. Thanks, Paul, for counting it. So I don't want to take any more time. I just think this is very exciting. And for me, I am new to the school building project. In fact, I can say, quite frankly, I have never built a school. But what I'm discovering as I start to be able to visit some schools, I visited one on Monday with Steve Schreiber that Danisco has built. It's very exciting to see examples of what we might be thinking about to help us guide our decisions. And they've assured us that to the extent we want to tour other schools, bring teachers with us, bring other people with us, that will be made available. So I think, Allison, with that brief introduction, I'd like to turn it over to Donna Danisco. And I think she texted earlier that they have both the presentation they sent in advance, but they have a more animated version. So if there's a way of giving her control of the presentation and introducing her team, that would be great.
Yep. And Donna, you should be able to share your screen and to present your slides. I just gave you that.
Let's see if I can do this. They would like to record this computer screen. That's a new one.
Yeah, it's because it's streaming. It's just legal protection.
So I have to open system preferences and accept it or something like that. So is that under privacy? I checked it. 1 second. I just cannot prepare enough, can you? So, do you know anyone? Sorry, I'm in Teams. I have it checked. Let's try it. Okay, so I'm going to try to share my screen. It's looking like you're not seeing it, so that's not good either. Let me try one more thing. Sorry. Thought we were all totally familiar with every single. All right. Are you able to see it now? Did I lose you?
No, we don't see it.
You don't see it. All right. I'm seeing my screen.
So worst case scenario, Mike, would she be able to email you the presentation?
It's a keynote. Yeah, it's a keynote. So if for whatever reason it's just animated and but that's okay. I don't know why I'm.
Well, while you're working on that, maybe Margaret could introduce herself.
Sure, that would be great.
To give a little bit of time,
you.
because I don't think the school committee has met. I don't think the school committee has met Margaret before. Is that okay, Kathy?
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you, Mike.
So this is like the intermission of the vaudeville show. So I'll give Donna some breathing room to figure out the technology. So, hi everyone. So I'm Margaret Wood. I'm an owner's project manager. The company that I work for is Answer Advisory. I have been working with the building committee since the summer. I think probably started in July. And I will continue to be at meetings. My job as the owner's project manager, I'm essentially an extension of the city. I provide the capacity to the town of Amherst and to the district to, manage the project because everybody else has a full-time job. So I'm essentially, providing that leadership. And the owner's project manager is selected through a competitive process. I want to say that we did that in July. It's been a while ago, and I've had an opportunity to meet with the building committee members for a couple of months now, and sort of helped them through the process of selecting Schematic Design. The Msba funding that comes to the district for the project and to the town, comes with the way to think about it is the MSBA is basically the bank, and sort of like a bank closing on funding. They have a whole set of requirements that we have to satisfy on the way to getting the funding for the project that will subsidize the cost of the project. And so we're really just at the beginning of this process. We have Danisco on board. It's the holiday season, so what we're expecting, and I think Donna will talk a little bit when she gets her show up, is that we're going to be starting and Donna has her show up. So I'm going to hush up and let Donna talk about this, other than just to say it's great to see you all, and I look forward to meeting many of you in person over the next year. So you may have seen that we met recently and decided that although the project had originally been discussed as heading for a November 2022 vote, we, and I would say this is Danisco and myself together, have suggested that we push that vote out to give us more time for community engagement and to allow for the conversation. So Don, I'm going to turn it back to you. So now we see it, but we can't hear you.
So there you go. All right.
Bingo.
This is,
all right.
boy, my problem is I have too many screens tonight, and I it's like a little overwhelming. So so if you can all see that, right? For some reason it says I'm getting a weird message, but if we think we're all good, I'm going to play this and let me know if you can you still see it? All right. When I go to play, I cannot hear anyone. Can you hear me when I press play?
So Donna, we can see you. The screen just went black, however.
All right, I got it.
But it's also not in display mode. We're seeing.
Yeah. So how is this? No. All right. This might be more effort than it's worth. Let me give one more shot. I have three monitors open because I need my window. So let me just do this one more time. I'm going to share this. You see that? Now you're going to see this. How does that work?
Yeah, that looks great.
Perfect.
That looks good, Donna.
All right.
Really good.
Jeez Louise.
You're on.
Okay, really, we thought we've mastered this. This is, anyway, so good evening, everyone. And, it seems like we've been already at this for over a month, but even longer. We're really excited to join your team. And it's not only the building committee and Answer, it's really the entire Amherst community. And we're starting to really get a flair and a flavor of what you're all about. We look forward to learning much more about you. So I guess tonight we're going to try to keep it short so we can engage in a conversation with you all. But as Margaret was saying, we'll go through a little bit about our team, talk about our community outreach, project aspirations, which we'll get into, and then really just the process and the overall preliminary schedule. So a little bit about our team, and we believe that our proposal interview presentation are available to you or will be shortly. So tonight we're just going to spend a couple of minutes talking about us and our approach to providing you all with a cost-effective and educationally appropriate student-centered school. At Danisco, we've been focusing on educational facilities since the inception of our firm for over 40 years. And we truly believe in inclusivity, teamwork, and we respect the value of hard work. We're a WBE firm, and we truly are very proud of our talented and diverse staff. With me tonight is Rick Rice. I can't see, I'm assuming everyone's faces are on. Rick Rice, principal in charge, Tim Cooper, who's an associate and project manager, Vivian Lowe, who's also a principal and the design lead, and Colin Finch was supposed to be here, but I think he ended up with a conflict. In addition to our core Danisco team, we have a talented, diverse consultant group that will support us throughout the project. And we're not going to go through it. I believe that this matrix is available or will be available, but we just really wanted to show you that our team runs deep. And just a little bit about Danisco and our experience and how relevant it is to the Fort Rivers School. Just over the last few years, we've actually had 4 projects that included consolidation of 2 schools. And we understand the importance of the community input and how it impacts the community. We have many new MSBA elementary schools, and many of them have the existing building on the same site of the new school. So we understand the complexities that go into that. And in addition, you know, we don't shy away from renovation additions. If it is the right solution for you and your community, we embrace this solution, and we understand the importance and how challenging it is for the contractor and the school to remain in operation at the same time. We understand the importance of separation of staff and students with the contractor, the laydown space the contractor requires, but that it can't infringe on student outdoor spaces, the traffic, and how those patterns may shift throughout the construction process. So we're really ready to explore the solution of a renovation addition as part of the feasibility study. We do believe, once I figure out how to use Zoom or whatever we want, that we really do excel at communication and outreach. And it was interesting, we were walking through the Hastings Elementary School the other day, that our communication and outreach is not only before the vote, but it also continues through design and construction. And I guess the one thing that we would say that what we've learned over the last 2 years is with COVID is how we communicate and engage with the community differently. We don't think it totally takes away from being in person, but we understand that we can actually reach a broader base of community support through virtual meetings. So as it relates to Fort River, we, starting in January, will start with several meetings. One would be focused on educational programming. Not one, but one aspect would be focusing on educational programming, meeting with the leadership team, staff and student involvement, and the PGO. And then simultaneously, we'll work with everyone to talk about what's important to them, what evaluation criteria is important for the community to base their decisions on, talk about the sites, the traffic, and even as far as utilization of whichever school is chosen not to be the school or the location for the new school. So here's an example of a matrix that we have developed, and we can't wait to actually get your input on what's important to you as a community, on what type of criteria is most important to you. And then this really translates into a very objective and easy way to realize which solution and which site really may be the best solution for you. We've learned a little bit about your project aspirations. We've gained some input from the RFS and listening a little bit to you all prior to us coming on board. And here's some lists or some items that we've identified as perhaps some of the project aspirations, but we also want to hear from the community, whether it's staff and students and families that go to the schools, or even beyond that, neighbors and larger community. So we'll be working with you all to make sure that the aspirations that are important to you are realized throughout the project. So what we'll do is we'll talk a little bit about the overall preliminary schedule, timeline, and MSBA, I guess, requirements as we go through it, because they actually dictate quite a bit of what goes on at the very beginning of the process. So when we first came on, we're realizing that it's really important for community outreach, and we need to get it right. And we do not want to rush the very first phases of the project, because that will determine what the actual solution will be and your preferred solution for the project. So part of the process is that we have to meet MSBA board meetings. And the first part is the preliminary design program and the preferred schematic report. We have to submit that to MSBA, and we'll get into the whole process in a little bit, but they only meet every 2 months, more or less. So we have to kind of back into their schedule. So as we started looking at the very beginning, we also wanted to look at the end of your project and realizing that there was an initial conversation about having a completed school ready for September of 2026. And we believe we can still achieve that. And until we really know what solution it's going to be, we're allowing backing up from September of 2026, 24 months for construction. We need to bid it. We need to prepare our bid documents. And as you move back, we still believe that we can achieve the end date of September of 2026 while giving the necessary time in the very front end to make sure that we have heard and have collectively arrived at the same solution. The one point I think to this is, I think there was some conversation about having a November 2022 referendum or vote, and what we're suggesting now based on MSBA board meetings is that that would occur sometime in the beginning of 2023, around February or March. So I kept talking about MSBA process. So these are the modules per MSBA guidelines. You had an eligibility period, you formed the team, here we are, and now we get into the feasibility study. This is where we will determine your preferred solution. Then we go to schematic design, funding the project, and then we get into the actual construction documents, finalizing the design, going out to bid, construction, and then completing the project. So what are the important activities for the feasibility study, or also known as the preferred schematic report? Our goal is to submit the preliminary design program in March. And what that comprises of is the educational program, which I believe is in really great shape. We just want to vet it and spend a little bit of time making sure that there hasn't been any changes from where you all left off last, I think, in 2018. We need to identify the existing conditions of both schools. We want to establish the design parameters, and that's part of that criteria matrix that we were talking about. And then to develop and evaluate alternatives. And that is going to include a renovation addition, new construction, and that may occur on multiple sites. Once we submit all of that, we summarize the process and the conclusions. We provide a costing, which will be part of this solution and what's best for you as a community. And then we submit our preferred solution to the MSBA. Once we have MSBA's approval to move forward, and they agree with our preferred solution, we then have to focus on the schematic design. And that will take about 6 months. And a lot of it is finalizing the design program, obtaining more information about what's important to you from a design perspective, and making sure that we have the right design in place, the square footage, the spatial relationships and adjacencies, what's important for you to go on the first floor or whatever, if it's a multiple story building. So it really is going to define the project scope and budget that you're going to enter in with MSBA. So you will have a total gross square foot. You're going to know exactly where your program is going to go, what the spatial relationships are. You're going to have a cost that you're going to agree to with MSBA, and that is going to establish what they're going to agree to provide to you from a reimbursement perspective. We submit that in, we think, December. 2023 calendar hasn't come out yet, but it's going to be sometime at the end of December. The MSBA votes in February, roughly. And then what you need to do is fund the project. So MSBA allows 120 days from when they vote for the district to secure your funding for the project. And as soon as you obtain the funding, we then proceed into the detailed design. So what's important right now is where we are and what kind of input we'll be seeking over the next year, actually, more or less. Again, our goal is to wrap up the preliminary design program, which is the educational program, mostly your criteria for what's going to come next. We will then focus, once that's submitted, we then will provide the alternatives with some rough costing. You'll present your preferred solution to move forward. MSBA will approve it, and then we can start working on schematic design. So what does come next? I kind of have said it already, but again, the educational program and developing the alternatives and establishing design criteria. And how are we going to do that? We're going to kick off 2022 in a positive, wonderful way. We are going to start visioning sessions with staff, students, family, and community. We'll meet with stakeholders to identify what the project aspirations and evaluation criteria are, and make sure that we have a broad base of community outreach for hearing what's also important to the community. They hear us and we hear them. And that's where we are. So I hope I've been able to somewhat concisely explain the process, but feel free to ask questions.
Thank you. Do folks want to see the slides as we're asking questions, or is it okay to stop presenting? I suppose we can pull up a slide if we need to reference back to it. Yeah, there's a lot of folks here. So we'll open it up for questions from or comments from the school committee and the school building committee, as well as our superintendent is welcome to ask questions as well, or you're on the school building committee. So since there's a lot of folks on the screen and I may not see you physically raise your hand, a lot of times we just do this. It would be helpful if we all try to use the raise hand function so that then I will get the audible ding and know that somebody's in line to ask a question. Thank you, Mr. Demling. Mr. Demling, and then is Spitzer.
Thank you. So, I mean, I'll state the obvious. I can't tell you how exciting it is that we are finally here. you know, I'm sure that you have been apprised and briefed of the history, but it's been, you know, almost 5 years to try and get to this meeting since the failure of the last project, and a lot of heartache and disappointment in those interim years. So it's just so wonderful to be able to kick this off. So, you know, so I don't want my following constructive criticism and pressing questions to color that. I am largely feeling very festive and enthusiastic and very positive about the road ahead. So just one very brief comment, and I would say this to the school building committee as well. We want to be sure to call this either the Amherst Elementary Building Project or the Fort River and Wildwood Project. One piece of criticism that I think was valid of the last project, even though I was a big supporter of the last project, is that for too long we called it the Wildwood Project, even though the final proposal is to replace both Fort River and Wildwood, and it was a communications issue. So that's just a minor question on that. My larger question, and I want to emphasize I don't need an answer tonight because it's a big question, is to ask you to work with the OPM and the building committee to consider what it would take. Is it possible to accelerate this schedule so that we could hit, say, fall 25 or spring 26? The reason why I ask is really twofold. One is the educational priority. It's really hard for me to overstate the level of sustained urgency and impatience that I've heard from the community on this for the past 5 years to get this done as soon as possible. That it's been delayed for too long, and that now that we have this near universal acceptance in town on the shortcomings of these buildings, that we need to move with pace. And as school committee, we're answerable, you know, to the community that is saying this and accountable. And so we need to be able to say that there was, of course, a balance, that it was thoughtful and responsible and community engagement, and yet was also as expeditious as possible, right? And that we pushed to get it done as soon as possible to get our kids into buildings that are going to service their education, which our Fort River and Wildwood are not currently doing. And the other general reason is the financial impact. I think pretty conservatively, even if you think about inflation rates that aren't lower than what they're at today, if the project of this magnitude, 1 year of cost escalation on a construction project is easily over $1 million. And then when you then factor in the additional operation costs of our two inefficient buildings today compared with the new building, that's a six-figure easily on the operations budget. And then we have systems failures. You know, we've unfortunately had major HVAC systems failures at both of our schools since the last project. And, you know, 2026 is still 5 years away. And the roofs are in serious condition, and we've had issues with those, and who knows what's to come. That could be a major financial impact. And really the biggest financial variable for me is the state exclusion vote. You know, when we ask residents to go to a voting booth and voluntarily increase their property taxes, we're going to be asked a very legitimate question, which is, you know, in the context of making the wisest long-term investment for the town, did we evaluate every possibility to make this project as cost-effective as possible? And we don't want to be penny wise and pound foolish, and we don't want to rush things, but there is this balance, right? And so as the school committee and the town, we need to be able to say to residents who, for some, this will be a hardship to increase their taxes. We need to say confidently that we left no stone unturned, that it was a project of maximum efficiency. And so maybe ultimately the answer is it's impossible to hit November 22. Maybe it's impossible to hit fall 25 or spring 26. But I really feel like we need to exhaust that possibility in a very robust way so that we can come to the community with that information. So thank you.
Go ahead. Ms.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Is it okay to respond or?
Yes, yes.
Okay, all right. So, Mr. Dumley, thank you. And we are truly excited to be here, and we understand the hardship that you've all gone through over, I think, since 2025 or 2015, and we understand the sense of urgency. the very front end is somewhat out of our control. MSBA, we have to meet certain milestones, and MSBA Board of Directors only meets certain times of the year, every 2 months, more or less. And we do believe wholeheartedly, after everything that you've been through, that we evaluate every single option. We have the best cost information to put forward to you, and that the community in its entirety supports the final solution. And so we feel that if we attempted to have a vote in November of 2022, that would accelerate our work. And I'm not even 100% sure it's even doable. If you wanted to vote in November of 2022, we would have to go to, I think, Margaret, it was like a August MSBA board meeting or September MSBA board meeting, which doesn't even give us 6 months to do, or 7 months to do the study and the feasibility and the schematic design. So I think that would be rushing things too much from the front end. But to answer you on how could we accelerate it, we think there is room to accelerate after we get the vote, and how we can accelerate that. We would have to work with you all because it's going to be a consolidation of 2 schools. So when is it in an okay time to merge the 2 schools? Is it okay to do it in the middle of the year, right? You have a week or 2 weeks between like school break in the middle of the winter, and you're going to have to move everyone into a new school, because it's not simply just moving the students from the existing school, it's consolidating. So we've done that. We've done December moves and January moves. We've done February moves. We have another school that's going to do, I even think, an April move. So if we think there's a way to accelerate the schedule and it works with you, primarily as a school committee, right? Are you okay making this huge move over a short period of time? We'll work with you on that. We have some time that we feel we should be able to accelerate, but it's mostly what's important and when it's appropriate to move the students. But we feel your pain and understand the cost implications for every month that you remain in those buildings. So we will absolutely do what we can to accelerate it.
Thank you.
And we're happy to call it not the Fort River School. So whatever works best for you. MSBA still refers to it as the Fort River School, but we're happy to just call it the elementary school. It's perfect.
Thanks. Ms. Wood, did you want to respond to that question, or you have another comment?
Well, so I want to say a couple things. So relative to the Fort River project, I want to clarify that it is the Amherst Elementary School project. That's the website name. If anybody hasn't looked, there's an Amherst School project website that's up now. The reason that Fort River gets bandied about is because the MSBA process requires that communities go into what's called the statement of intent process, naming a school. So the MSBA calls it the Fort River project only because the statement of intent that went in identified Fort River. But in fact, once you're in the process, you are not limited to looking at Fort River. Then it is now transformed, except on a list that the MSBA has, to the Amherst Elementary School project. So I just thought it was important for people to understand, if you're seeing that around, it's because it came from, it's the name on the statement of intent. The other thing I want to say is, I think just want to echo what Donna said, but also to say that I think in what you said is what you described as the inherent conflict, which is we want to do it as fast as possible, but we want to take the time to do it right. I mean, the schedule that Donna has presented, which I've also concur with, is it possible that we could do better than that? Yes, but I think in terms of setting expectations, we don't want to set something that we're going to do worse than, first of all. Secondly, I think that there's a hazard, particularly in the design process, to going too fast, because that can cost money. If the designer is speeding through the process, that can cost money. If you are speeding through the community engagement process, that can result in people not supporting the project. So I would say, when you think about talking to people who are saying, like, why should we vote for this? I think hopefully one of the reasons would be because we've taken the time to sort of build the community support for the right solution, and it's taken a long time to get there. But now we're sort of on a timeline that is common. So it takes about 5 years as a minimum for the projects that are funded through the MSBA to get from statement of intent to conclusion. And you're sort of right there. So could we do a little better? Maybe, but I think expectation setting here is important. And as Donna said, we hear you.
Ms. Spitzer.
Thanks. I want to echo Mr. Dumbling's enthusiasm and just state how excited I am that we are at this state or this stage in the process. I had a couple of clarifying questions. So one of the things that kind of goes hand in hand with this project was the decision to made by this committee and the regional committee to move the 6th grade to the middle school. And so I guess when I'm looking at the preliminary design program phase, which is 3 months, and it's coming up pretty soon, and has to do with, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like I'm just now kind of really putting my head into thinking about this whole process. It's going to be when we're thinking about the educational programming stuff. So this is somewhat a question for Dr. Morris and also for the design team, but just how is this going to intersect with the planning that's going on around that transition? Because we asked for, and I don't want to slow this process down because I also feel strongly with Mr. Demling, like we need these buildings as soon as possible. However, I do feel like there's this intersection of the planning around the transition and making sure that this plan reflects whatever those future decisions, or can we revisit it as we get more clarity on things with regard to moving the 6th grade out of our elementary school buildings and into and I see your hand raised, Dr. Morris. I just have one other question, so I wanted to just wrap up. And so the other question I had was when we were talking about moving the vote. Now, the way I'm understanding this is the vote we're talking about moving is a vote taken by the MSBA. And I also just wanted to, or is it the vote taken by the town by the town residents to authorize the funding? So, and what I'm hearing is that that's actually not going to delay us from the 2026 deadline. So right. On the preliminary schedule, I'm just looking at it, is that which item is that? Because it's hard for me to see there's the town obtained funding. It just doesn't appear to like it's on the preliminary schedule slide number 17. And maybe just clarifying that for the committee would be helpful for me. So thank you very much.
I don't know which is a quicker response, but Dr. Morris, do you want to respond to the first part?
Yeah, and I can do it quite briefly and pass it off to Donna. This is something that the NISCO team and I talked about I think it was last week. So, I think, and I'll update on a future agenda item, like future is in 35 minutes from now, about the 6th grade piece, but we're trying to align the engagement so that it's not, all the engagements not happening at once. Right, that's a bad outcome. When we say, oh yeah, there's 4 engagements on 2 different things and we want you all to come, we know that that actually detracts from the engagement that we want for each of the distinct pieces, both the 6th grade piece and then what's relevant to this item, which is the MSBA. What you saw on the timeline that Donna presented was a real focus on engagement over the next 2 months from the MSBA. And because of that, when we get to my update on the 6th grade piece, we're going to make sure that that happens first, because there's the MSBA board meets irregularly, relative to you all. And so slowing down the process for MSBA to have 6th grade engagement happen first. We don't have an MSBA on the 6th grade piece, or you all are the MSBA on the 6th grade piece. So we'll be able to do that. So we are trying to make sure that we're aligning the engagements and sequencing them so that it's not because we've done that, we've learned from lessons before. We had multiple projects going on in the community. And when we tried to ask everyone to engage in too many, it really detracted from the product. So that engagement that you saw, that map that Donna presented, was based on a conversation we had about making sure that we're, to Peter's point, pushing the envelope on timeline on the MSBA project, and it might shift some of the engagement in the 6th grade piece to be more February or more March oriented, so that it has time, people have time to engage in the multiple pieces to it. So I just want to say I really appreciate Donna and your team for understanding the complexities of the multiple engagements going on and having conversation with me so that we didn't end up, because no one wants to offer too many engagements at once. It happens because lack of communication. So, I really want to compliment the team here for communicating, understanding the realities here, and then really pushing the envelope on the timeline so that we can sequence things accurately. I'll let Donna and the team talk about, your second question, because that's certainly more in their bailiwick.
Thanks. And so I'll turn it back over to you, Donna and Margaret, for the other part of the question.
So I'm sorry, Carrie. So the question was the vote MSBA's vote, or was it the town's vote? Was that your?
I just wanted some clarity, because when I look at the preliminary schedule, there are multiple MSBA votes, but I don't see the town vote. And so I just wanted to make sure I was understanding properly where you were proposing to move the town vote to, and how it fit into the whole schedule.
Sure. So that's on the overall chart that we had there, and it's showing somewhere, I think it was February, March of 2023. And if you want, I can pull up maybe the presentation. Let me see. Let me get you the exact page.
Donna.
Yep, slide 17. Do you see that? And
no, it's not. It's not on the screen. I'm going to try sharing again.
I'll try again.
I have it on my screen. Is it the town obtained funding? Is that what?
Yes.
Okay, so that is the town vote. It just wasn't clear to me
Yes.
that was what was meant by that. So
Yes.
thank you for that.
Yes.
And that has to occur after the MSBA approval.
So, right, there are 2 MSBA board votes. There's many internal staff reviews with MSBA. The first one would be the preliminary design program, but MSBA has the vote to accept your preferred solution, which will be from study into schematic design. Then we put together what's most important for you: cost, program, overall square footage, all of that. We submit it, then they vote. Once they have approved your solution and it establishes the project budget and scope of the project, that's when you would obtain your town funding or vote. MSBA, like I said, gives 120 days, but we're hoping that we can work with you so we can get the word out far in advance of MSBA's vote, so we can do that shortly after MSBA approves the project.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. Communities can do the local appropriation or the local vote before the MSBA votes, but generally it really helps with the community engagement to do the local vote after the MSBA votes, because then you kind of get to see, look, the MSBA is waiting. It's our turn to, it's your turn as voters to decide if you want to do that. And as Donna was saying, we don't actually know the schedule for the MSBA meetings at the beginning of 23, but we anticipate there's probably a meeting in February or early March. So we submit everything. We have the price for the project, the cost for the project in December, or perhaps even probably early December. Then we submit it, then we have a chance to sort of do all the community outreach and, really give people the detail and answer specific questions about the cost and the MSBA vote process. So, again, as back to Peter Denling's question, could you do that by November? I think it would really be hard. And the quality of the work that is the basis of the cost agreement would suffer.
And so now I'm going to go to Mr. Schreiber, who's been very, very patient with his hand raised for a long time. So, Mr. Schreiber.
I'm just proud that I could figure it out. So I'm Steve Schreiber. I'm the vice chair of the Elementary School Building Committee. And it's nice to see you all. It was a real pleasure to meet the DISCO team in person yesterday, along with Chair Shane. My question really has to do with local review. So we've talked a lot about MSBA, about the different milestones that the school committee, the elementary school building committee, what they have to be. But there's a lot of town municipal review also. And I'm just curious how that fits into the critical path. So I was making a list of everything from Design Review Board, which has a say in town buildings, the Planning Board, the Conservation Commission. This is not necessarily in order. And Historical Commission, because by the time this starts, these buildings will be over 50 years old. So therefore they're subject to whatever. So I'm just curious how that overlays on these other reviews. And there might not be an answer, but it's something to be considered.
Oops, sorry, Donna?
Yeah, sorry, I meant to raise the hand, not my mic. Thanks, Steve. We will begin the entire process. Preliminarily, we will start during the preferred schematic or feasibility study. But as soon as we know what the preferred solution is, we will start that engagement with everyone. Conservation Commission, submitting an ANRAD, right? We're making sure that we have the wetlands delineated appropriately. We're thrilled that you have a design review committee. We think that really makes the process richer, so we can start that conversation. We obviously are happy to go before the local historic. We do have to submit for state mass historic because it's a process, it's part of state funding, and we're required to do that, but we'll certainly do that locally as well to make sure that we incorporate anything that they have to say. So we will start the engagement and do it quickly as soon as we enter schematic design and we have a preferred solution. That's when we start what we call our town circle of meeting with all your boards. Other committees that we'd like to talk to are sustainability. We want to do that prior to that, but all of these review processes, we will certainly start as soon as we have a preferred solution.
Thank you. Ms. Phoebe Merriam.
Hi, thank you. My question, and one that I've raised with the building committee, but I don't think it was the appropriate place to raise it. I'm glad that we're meeting with all of the school committee now. Has to do, and I know design is very far off, but when is the period of time where you guys as the school committee with Mike discuss the educational planning around Crocker and how that will impact the design aspects and what needs to go into the building when we, consolidate these schools? That seems to be a big piece, and I'm just not understanding where that happens in the multi-year timeline, so that we know that the way that the new building is configured and designed meets the needs of exactly what we need without leaving the fact that Crocker is going to exist, continue to exist as a school, and what that looks like.
Donna?
Thank you. For MSBA, we really have to look at the 3 schools holistically. And so we will be having those conversations now, again, part of the preliminary design program. And we too believe that although they may not be incorporated as part of the building project, that equity is important, and understanding the district-wide low incidence programs, how that may impact Crocker moving the students, some students out of Crocker Farm, how that may allow for additional programs or equitable programs among the schools. So that conversation will be part of the overall educational program. That's the start of it. And Superintendent Morris, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, so I agree with everything you said, and I think that's going to develop over time. I think we also have to look at what the enrollments are over time. So this really connects to matters that do come to the school committee, such as school choice and how many school choice students we take because of the kind of merging of school populations and shifting that would involve connecting with Crocker Farm as well. So I think it's a great question, Phoebe. I'm glad you raised it and keep raising it because I think it's an important, it's once we get into the weeds of, ad reno versus new and all this stuff, it can become easy. And that's why it's so important that you raise it to forget about the impact on Crocker Farm. And certainly it influences our capital requests. We, through Rupert, who's on this call, our facilities director, it's not that we're not doing changes or improvements to Fort River and Wildwood, but I think over the next 3 years, you're going to see a real shifting of priorities and financial priorities and I think we've already started seeing that to Crocker Farm because of all the reasons you mentioned. I think if we are eventually going to invest significant funds through this project, yes, MSBA is going to pay a substantial amount, but so is the town. We want to make sure that we're not forgetting that Crocker Farm's addition or ad reno is now going to be 20 years old. And that is a while, and there are things that need to be fixed there. So I think it's part of the educational conversation because we do want to have consistent educational programming across our schools to the extent possible, but also it's about the facilities and making sure that Crocker Farm's facilities hold up for a long time as well. I think, we've been pretty public about some of the challenges that we've seen at Crocker Farm over the last couple of years, and that we continue to put funds in for, skylight replacements and improvements and the roof problems we've had at Crocker Farm. And, playground is something else that we're looking at, the back playground. So we do need to keep that in the forefront along with this project. And I'm sure that you'll keep us honest and keep us connected on that. And that's a really helpful voice. So I appreciate it.
Other questions? I think while others are raising their hand, I'll ask a question. You talk a lot, and you had one slide talking about the types of community outreach and engagement you're hoping and planning to do in the first half of next year as we develop that initial we're getting the acronym for that submission, preferred schematic. I think it's like. Could you talk a little bit more about sort of how, sort of your experience with sort of the different ways that you've done that or might be already having conversations about envisioning how that might work here? You talked about different stakeholder groups and that, but I'm curious if you could provide a little bit more story about that.
Sure, thank you. I also have Vivian and Tim and Rick, if anyone wants to, feel free to chime in. But our goal is to reach out to everyone and whatever works best for your community. So we first want to kind of have conversations to understand what has been successful in town. But more importantly, how can we reach out to a broad group of stakeholders, community, local community, broader community. So we've talked about, of course, Zoom, virtual meetings, that's all great. We actually have talked about different people maybe having different interests. So we've talked about having workshops per se, or large, like a kind of a large meeting that might have various workshops within it, such as some folks might be interested in sustainability, some may be interested in educational, some may be interested in what are you going to do with this school that is not going to be a school anymore. Traffic is probably going to be a large consideration. So we've even talked about having like workshops where smaller groups can come in maybe feel a little more comfortable having conversations instead of on a virtual with 30, 40, 100 people, where you can have nice dialogues with them and have a more intimate setting. And then they can rotate to the other quote unquote rooms or breakout sessions per se, where they may be able to listen in and not feel as intimidated to ask a question if they're just learning about the process. That's one suggestion of how we might want to engage the community. We also would like to have local neighborhood meetings, whether it's at Crocker Farm, Wildwood, or Fort River as well, to talk to those individual neighborhoods and what the impact is to the local neighborhoods. And then, of course, the broader community. Vivian or Tim, if I'm missing anything, you want to chime in?
Yeah, I think just to, as an overall, what we want to do is to create the forums for as many people can to participate. So when Donna spoke about breaking out into smaller groups, our initial vision is to have possibly a community forum where then we could develop some focus groups, and these folks could then break out into the smaller focus groups. And, you know, we might continue those focus groups separately as we continue in on the design process. So that's one avenue where we engage the broader community. We have also had meetings or visioning sessions with the school community, and that might include parents and students and teachers. We basically sit in the cafeteria. I'm not sure how this will work with the COVID, but way back when we were able to meet in person, we all sat in a cafeteria and we would break out into groups, again, with a designer and possibly some other folks facilitating the groups. And we'd have a list of questions about, you know, how you envision the entry sequence. What is most important to you? What works at your school now? What doesn't work? What are you looking for? So, you know, this will engage, again, in smaller groups, but at the end of this session, or we've had 2 or 3 sessions, we'll get back together as a larger group, have a spokesperson talk about some of these pieces, components that were discussed, and then we'll follow up again once we've had a chance to go back to the drawing board and develop some of these thoughts. So our goal is to engage as many people at each level as possible. And really important as we get into schematic design, we really jump in feet first with the staff and the principal and the school department, again, to really understand what the needs are. Hope that helps them. Tim and Rick, if you have anything to add.
Thank you. That was helpful, really helpful. I thought I saw a hand get raised earlier. Kathy, Ms. Shane.
Hi, I just wanted to make a comment on when I visited the school in Lexington on Monday, where the team you have in front of you, and Mike unfortunately had a cold, and I was glad he didn't come because I'm getting on a plane on Friday, so I didn't want his cold. But one of the things I saw is the level at which people in the school knew the team. The librarian says, "Ah, you're back. Look at what we did with this library." The principal was talking about how the layouts were working with breakout small groups outside the classrooms. Then we got to the facilities person, who I thought was going to hug the team. He was so happy to, but on a first name basis. I mean, it was really kind of remarkable on the extent that you felt that the team had been there, and the school we were seeing was because people had decided what they wanted. And we were asking, is there anything that you would have done differently or didn't work the way you hoped now that you have it? And we got one where this one board could be in the center of the room rather than in the wall, but I mean, it was like a foot over, but it was for the most part, oh no, let me show you how well this works. So it was very impressive what you had done to build a school and around an educational program that fit that population. And I just felt it was very visible. So I am totally enthusiastic that you will figure out how to come out despite COVID and be out and getting to know you and what do we hope for. And the other thing I would just say is there's been an offer that if we see schools or we hear of schools that we think are working well, to do site visits, bringing parents, bringing teachers, bringing a group to tour them, to get a sense of physically what does this look like if you build this way. So I thought that it was a pretty exciting way to see what something might look like if we wanted something like that, for me.
Thank you. Ms. Denisko?
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Every school we walk into, even 10 years later, hopefully the staff are still there, but it does become like family. And imagine us designing your home. I mean, that's truly how personal we take it. And it's not our school. We will design to meet the function and needs of you individually. I think what will be really important is working together with the two schools and bringing them together and building something that is going to be new and exciting and for everyone. And we do look forward. We don't like to just go to our schools. Of course, ours are beautiful, but we want to go to look at others that maybe have looked at things differently and what works and doesn't work. And we're all inspired by seeing something new. So we will absolutely work with you. Even MSBA has suggested some schools that maybe we want to visit. So again, ultimately it's your school and it's what's important to you, and what you saw at Hastings, might not work for you, but hopefully it inspires you.
Are there any other questions from the building committee or the school committee? Mr. Demling?
Yeah, I just want to real quick, let's just say I'm really glad that Ms. Marion brought up Crocker Farm, because we're, for two reasons. One is, it's a real challenge on the school committee to prioritize Crocker for capital, because right now it's competing with two buildings that are in not good shape. And so the best thing that we can do for Crocker's known capital needs is to cycle these buildings off. And that will instantly catapult Crocker Farm to the top of the list, which is this other key advantage to this project is not having to maintain these very costly to maintain buildings, which related to the larger point, there is a sensitivity we should have for the Crocker Farm community. As a former Crocker Farm parent, I love the school, and we don't want a third of our parents, a third of our community to feel like they're now the forgotten child, right? And even though Crocker is in better shape than these two buildings, it does have its own needs that we want to address. And so when we communicate, when we engage, when we talk about holistically what we're thinking about, it's not just the educational plan, but it's this capital need as well. And the sooner that we know for sure that this project has succeeded, the sooner we're going to be able to really taper down on the capital investments into Fort Irving Wildwood and redirect them to Crocker.
Other questions or comments? Ms. Spitzer.
Sorry, I'll try to keep it brief, but I'm going to go back to the vote being moved, just because now that I understand it more, it's being moved to a time of year when we used to have town votes, but now we've kind of started having our votes in November, and I'm just a little, and this is my last chance as a school committee member, because this is my last Amherst School Committee meeting, so I just want to put out there that I think it poses some opportunities and challenges. Our voters will be able to really focus in on this issue, but it's also going to be at a time of year when Amherst residents haven't become used to necessarily voting. So I guess I have just a question, and I understand the constraints in moving it up, but I wanted to clarify. I'm assuming there's also constraints in moving it to be in November when we would typically have an election. And just raising this issue again, not that we need to solve it tonight, but it seems to me like an important one to bring up, because we're going to need to make sure that voters are fully informed and aware that there's going to be an election potentially at a time of year when we're not typically voting as a town anymore. So that was it. And does it need, well, who gets to decide when that vote actually, who has the final decision-making power on when the timing of that vote occurs? I'm just curious.
Mr. Bockelman.
Yeah, so ultimately it's the town council that makes the decision on if to put it on the ballot and when to put it on the ballot. And we were subject to the MSBA schedule, and so there are timeframes around that. I mean, I think we all would hope to put it on the November election, but I think the evidence presented by our consultants was that it was too rushed. The community involvement wouldn't be adequate to push it into the November 22 ballot. So the next best option is the spring of 23.
Ms. Shane.
Just to add to what Paul said, I'm on the good. I'm just making sure my mic is on. My hand just went up again, but the council will have to vote to put it on the ballot, and there's a certain amount of time before it goes on the ballot, Carrie. So we will do our best to get the word out that this is an off cycle, if it is indeed off cycle, and do a lot of promotion around it. We're talking about an effort to get out the vote in terms of alert people there is a vote, you know, and all hands on deck, and have thought of some ways of making sure people are aware of it. And the other thing of what Donna said, just to underscore it, is we need a really good cost estimate before we go out to get a vote, or we might not get the amount of money we need, you know. So we need to be on a, it's not too much and it's not too little, so that's solid, cost effective, and have the arguments. So I think there's going to be, it won't be catching people by surprise that this is coming. We'll be able to do it. And just, I want to make one other comment, since this is our joint meeting. Alice and I have talked about having some of these on a periodic basis, but we would welcome any of you coming to listen to the school building committee. We're going to start, our next meeting will be on January 5th at 8 in the morning. And I'm hoping at that point, and I talked just really quickly with the DNISCO team, we'll probably be meeting every 2 weeks. So we can put a schedule out of when all the meetings are, and to the extent we can, we'll try to say what's going to be on the agenda of each. So even if, okay, this one is of lessons, or this, now that we have the whole team on, we're better able to do that than when we didn't have DNISCO on, you know. So some of it's going to happen in the school world, where the meeting around the educational plan is not the building committee, but I think we'll get a clearer schedule. So trying to create a buzz and awareness that we are really moving toward a school that people won't be able to say. I think Phoebe was the one who said, how will people even know we've started? You know, we're going to try to make sure people know we've started.
Thanks. Are there any other questions? Mr. Demling.
Sorry, this meeting has been like 5 years coming, so I was really short. So there's the debt exclusion override vote that the public takes, but then the town council will also take a bond authorization vote. And in our 2016 project, the debt exclusion override vote happened first. It was successful, and then the bond authorization vote happened afterwards, and that failed multiple times. So is there I guess an open question to either Margaret or Don or whomever, and Paul or Kathy. Is there thinking this time as to how that will be sequenced? My not too well informed understanding is that it's more typical in an MSBA process to have the bond authorization happen first, but I don't know if that's a decision point or a recommendation that has been discussed so far.
Mr. Bockelman?
It has not been discussed, and it is, again, it's up to the council to make those two decisions.
Thank you. If there's Ms. Miriam.
Sorry, I'll be hopefully short-winded. We're talking a lot about these votes, and one of the things that I want to say about the town of Amherst is that, you know, I've been here for a very long time. And I think that as long as, and it seems like we're all on the same page about it, I think as long as we can really do our work to get the information out there, whether it's about a vote coming up or whether it's about the fact that, you know, even just that this project has started again, that we're months into this, that there's plans coming up, that there's ed plans being talked about. I think as long as we can do the work that we really need to do to bring this into our community and to let people know, I think that people are looking for solutions. So I don't think it's going to be an easy process, especially because we have to get this information out there and we need to start doing that soon. And it has to be in a way that we can reach every single member of this town. But I think for me, I'm less worried about when the votes happen or how they're happening, and more about how do we get the town involved and excited about the possibility of fixing a problem with 2 out of our 3 schools. And as long as we can do that really well, then I think the rest of it sort of in some way works itself out. So I think a lot of our conversations should be about, how do we get this out? How do we share this? How do we share the excitement and make sure that everybody is on board and also excited and gets their questions answered so that they can understand what it is that we're trying to do here, for the betterment of our schools, our children, our community, all of it. So that's it. Thank you.
I think that's a great comment to end on. So thank you, Ms. Miriam. And I think I'll just add just like a footnote on that, because I think earlier in this conversation we talked about sort of this dichotomy of moving fast versus getting it right, and talking about getting it right. And I prefer to think about it as doing well, because there's more than one right answer. As we know, in a community like ours, there's going to be as many ideas of solutions to the problem as you described it, Ms. Miriam. And it's not about which one is right, because they could all be right. It's sort of bringing us together to the one solution that we can all get behind. And it may not be the absolute right one for me or for my next door neighbor, but it is one that we can all support and get behind, because it is a good solution. And we've done the work, as you've described, Ms. Miriam. We've worked really hard to hear all of those opinions, hear all of those ideas, and integrate as much as we can into creating that solution. So with that, I'm going to look to Ms. Shane, if you would like to adjourn your.
I will adjourn the school building committee, and the way we do it is I just say the meeting's adjourned, and everyone on the school building committee and our presenters who want to leave. So the school building committee is adjourned. We will be meeting next on January 5th at 8 in the morning, and we'll work to post that agenda very soon so people can see what's on it, and it will build on the presentation you just heard. Thank you very much for having us. Thank you, Danisco, for a great set of charts, and for all of you joining us tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us tonight. Great. And I believe that those slides, they're posted in this tonight's meeting document, but it will also be posted on that new building committee website as well, correct? Great. So next up on our school committee agenda is our safety and health updates, and that's COVID safety and health updates. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Morris for that update.
Yep, and just given we're on the agenda, I'll try to go through this expeditiously. So I mentioned the vaccine clinics that we had, both 3 at the elementary schools as well as the additional clinic, where today 39 students, both in Amherst and Pelham, received their second shots. They received their first shots 3 weeks ago. The location was at the high school, but it was open to all children because we know that there was, high demand, and we wanted to provide another option for families. As a result, we're at as of last Thursday, they come out on Thursdays, 64% of children, Amherst and Pelham are looped together because the state reports it by zip code. But, we have close colleagues in Pelham that way, and we try to support them as well. So 64% of our 5 to 11-year-olds had received at least one shot, over 40% their second shot, which is both well over the state averages, close to double the state averages on that. So really appreciate our Amherst Health Department for their incredible outreach, our staff members who, as I mentioned before, were holding hands and supporting our students, some of whom had families there and some who didn't, weren't able to. So through those clinics, and also for families for making the choice that, in my opinion, is the best one for the safety and health of our community. So I think one caution point is that percentage of 64% 2 weeks ago was at 60, last week was at 62, and this week is at 64. So we may be plateauing a bit, and that's true with the state data too. There was some early adopters, and so I don't want to sound negative about that, but I do want to, and I think I am proud of that number. Comparatively, it's quite high, but it's also is worth noting that we're not seeing much delta over the last 2 weeks. That may be because availability has gotten much more challenging at this point. Most people are, the state clinic in Springfield is kind of one of the few shops in town that has appointments, from what I understand, other than the clinics we organized. But it is worth noting that is something we're keeping an eye on. We try to make it fun at the elementary clinics. We had, one of those picture frame boards that, said I'm fully vaccinated, and, lollipops, we try to make it as festive as we could. And it was effective. Kids liked that stuff, and families liked, taking the pictures. And so after students whose families weren't there, we had a picture of them in that, and then we took a picture of the vaccine card and emailed it to the families on site. So if the vaccine card perhaps did not get back in backpacks in the same condition it was put in them, that at least there was photographic evidence, which is what ended up being very important. So we did send that along, and just again, thanks to the Amherst Health Department and Director Brown for her work on that. I don't want to pretend that I am a public health, expert or degree, but I think it is fair to say that the Omicron variant is causing, significant levels of concern. I emailed the staff about this yesterday. I think it was a quote from former CDC director Tom Frieden, which is the same strategies that we had are still the same strategies: masking, distancing, ventilation, frequent hand washing. All the things that we've been doing since the beginning of the pandemic are still the things that we need to continue to do. And really the distancing's the double down for me, is that it's really hard at elementary school to expect distancing. And it's really important, with what we're seeing across the world. And certainly, even just reading that New York and New Jersey are up to 13% of cases are identified with that variant, which, that we don't have that data for Massachusetts, but likely not wildly different in Massachusetts than it is in some neighboring states in the Northeast. It's a cause of concern. So we do have to stay really vigilant. Same as at the secondary, we're not seeing community spread in schools to date. I'll say this as long as I can say it, but we have no evidence of spread within our schools. We are seeing significant community spread, which is no surprise to anybody who lives in the area or reads the local or the statewide papers around it. And we're seeing it often from gatherings in places without good ventilation on mass settings. So there is pretty significant concern about there's holidays that many people in our community celebrate coming up. And so we will have to track and watch that and see if it follows the same pattern we saw after Thanksgiving here. You know, the numbers seem to have plateaued in Massachusetts in terms of new cases. We're now seeing the increase in hospitalizations, which always is a lagging indicator from the new cases. It's plateauing at a very high level, but we're not seeing the exponential growth to date. That seems to, at the moment, plateaued, but it is something we're highly aware of, and it's a challenge not just for our students, but for our staffing levels as well. As we encourage staff members who are not feeling well to stay home, every day is a bit of an adventure with making sure that that we have the full staffing for the complement of student needs and strengths that we have in our schools. You know, I think I forwarded to the school committee, there was a Harvard public health person who created a pretty comprehensive comparison of districts across the state and new cases represented from September till, I think, last week. Comparatively, we do quite well. I think 11 was the number of students all fall in a district that, you know, 1,000 or so students, you know, as a per capita basis. We did quite well to our neighbors. I think that's in part because of the high vaccination rate of our staff. Certainly elementary school students, it's just more recent that they could be vaccinated, but also because we've been really strict on mitigation measures. And so we're going to continue with that. I think we have evidence of success. And it's something that with new variants and different transmission, initial transmission data, you know, is something that we will continue to have to keep an eye on. And I know it's cumbersome. You know, I think I said this in the news a couple weeks ago. Like, I don't want to wear a mask all day, or, you know, our teachers don't want to wear a mask all day, our students don't want to wear a mask all day. And yet the outcome on the other side of that is, you know, what our commitment is trying our best to make sure that school goes on uninterrupted, or as uninterrupted as possible for our students and staff as we can. And so the cost benefit of perhaps being more risky with mitigation measures is, you know, risking the thing that we're so serious about, which is high quality in-person schooling. And so we're trying to balance those as best we can, but I do hear the concerns and complaints of families whose kids don't want to wear a mask anymore, or concerns about how they're learning, you know, some reading acquisition without seeing teachers kind of how their lips are moving. Those are all very real concerns. I want to honor those, and yet, you know, our ultimate goal is about safety, but it's also about maintaining the mode of instruction that is the most beneficial for our students and staff. And we're going to be dogged about it. And, you know, given the numbers we've seen right now, I think it'd be premature to talk about reducing mitigation measures. And this can't last forever, right? And by this, I mean, you know, all the mitigation measures we have. On the flip side, I do think, you know, more and more evidence is showing that some version of COVID is here for a very long time, you know, and you know, I think when we were in last spring, maybe we're talking about not necessarily eradication, but more or less elimination of this as a major factor. I don't think that's the world that the people I follow, the people I respect in the public health field. We're now in the kind of the paradigm shift of how do we live with some version of COVID for at least the next couple of years. And that doesn't mean we have the same mitigation measures for the next couple of years. Just evolve. I think the best analogy I've heard, perhaps predicting the future is a mistake in a public meeting, but it's just, it may become like the weather. We may have, you know, pretty clear sunny days as it relates to COVID, where over time we may be able to relax some things, and we may have stormy periods where we may have to reintroduce some mitigation measures. There's going to be an ebb and flow to this that will, it would be nice and simple if it was just a start, you know, we're going to end this and we're going to start this, but I think that's unlikely in the future, that I think we will have some degree of needing to adjust with what the forecast is and what we're seeing on the ground. So when I get concerns right now about masking, what I see on the ground is that we need to continue that. And for me, in my conversations with public health officials, that's not going anywhere anytime soon. I'd love it if it did, because that'd mean our numbers were lower and we would be in a better place. But I think we have to get a handle on new variants and the winter season, which is not tougher for all respiratory illnesses altogether. You know, we've got, you know, our nurse leader was telling me, you know, we're starting to see in our community some flu, maybe not early, but a little earlier in the numbers than we've seen in the past. We're starting to see, you know, the typical colds that come around in this time of year. So we're working hard to keep our community as safe as we can, while also offering a high quality in-person experience. On that topic, two changes that we've made, or adjustments we've made, is that according to state protocol, the test and stay model is only open to unvaccinated individuals. So in other words, if a paraeducator is a close contact to a positive case and they're vaccinated, they would come into school. They don't have a state-supported testing option conveniently available. That being said, we understand that paraeducators serve incredibly special purpose in our district. They're most likely to be close contacts with students because of the nature of their work. They're also, while the percent increase their salaries, went up last year, they're still comparatively not our highest paid employees. And so we started a program where if a vaccinated paraeducator does become a close contact and would like a Binex test, they don't have access to the test and stay ones. Those are defined by a state controlled system, but we purchased Binex tests that paraeducators could request and take home and do their testing themselves, because we want to support our staff members who are in that situation. Yes, they may be vaccinated. Yes, that's a state protocol, but we could go above and beyond to support those individuals in our staff. So I really want to thank Debbie Westmoreland and Robin Supernaut for being really creative in their thinking about how to support those staff members. And my final update on this matter is that we are, for our K-12 students, we are ending or sunsetting our participation in the state's test and stay program. Again, the test and stay program was for unvaccinated close contacts to be able to return to school. They would get tested every day for a week with a Binex test in the morning. And so it's been a successful program for us this year. It's been somewhat less successful some of our neighboring districts who are seeing more positive cases. The model of test and stay was based on a system in Utah last year, which was pre-Delta, obviously pre-newer variants as well, like Omicron. And they found that there was a non-zero number of positive cases, but in the relative weight, this is pre-vaccine for young kids, it made sense that to do, and I agreed with that. But right now we do have a vaccine for young kids that is available. What we're seeing, Lexington or somewhere in Kentucky just did a big study. It was about 3% of their test and stay students tested positive. So we had some concerns there. We also have Binex tests. I do them regularly. I think they're relatively effective. However, we're putting a lot of stakes in a Binex test that's not 100% or not even 95% effective. And so there's some degree of risk of relying on those. There's been a number of cases across the state where a pooled test comes out positive, but everyone takes a Binex and they all come out negative because it's less sensitive than a PCR test to that. And so we did have some concerns around that. The way test and stay works is that students rely on their families for transportation to get them to school, because until they test negative, they can't be on a bus or anything like that. So there's an inherent equity challenge in that families who can't transport their children to school can't participate in test and stay. So we felt really uncomfortable with that element. And, honestly, we don't know what the future is going to hold with Omicron. Well, there's some, the South Africa study had some relatively positive, one could look at some positive impact in terms of severity on adults. That's still being debated. There was some not so good impact or not so good reports on severity in kids with actually a higher hospitalization rate reported. I know the data is still early, hasn't been peer reviewed, but it's a real cause of concern. And so for us, what we're doing is we are hiring some retired staff members to offer tutoring for students who are in quarantine. If they're unvaccinated and they're a close contact, they will have to go into quarantine, which is the norm in most states in our country, most of our neighboring states as well, starting in January. So we really encourage folks to get vaccinated. We think that's incredibly important for the health and safety of our students and staff. If they choose not to be vaccinated, then we will follow the CDC regs on quarantine for those close contacts. That is a little different than what's offered in Massachusetts, but again, we feel like this is supported. This was a recommendation from our health department director here in Amherst, and I have received positive feedback from local pediatricians in the area who share some concerns about test and stay in the same way I described. So that goes into effect after the break. For preschoolers who don't have a vaccine available, we'll continue with the test and stay program because they don't have another option. They don't have yet a vaccination option. And I think that's my health and safety update. I was less succinct than I aimed to be. I apologize, but certainly there's a lot going on as it relates to health and safety on December 14th, 2021.
Can I restate what I think you just described about what happens beginning after the break for test and stay? So students who are vaccinated and are deemed to be a close contact of the positive COVID case, they don't have to quarantine, and they won't participate in any test and stay. They'll just continue unless they show symptoms. Any student who is not vaccinated after the break, who is deemed to be a close contact of a positive COVID case, will be required to quarantine at home until they demonstrate that they are COVID free.
Yeah, so it's the rules in our state is if you test negative after the 5th day of quarantine, you can return on the 8th day. Yeah, the test has to be after day 5, and then you can return on day 8, which is consistent with CDC, or national kind of quarantining rules that most states are utilizing at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you. I didn't say that well because I was concerned about perhaps concerned about the length of my update, but that was succinct and clear.
Ms. Spitzer.
Thanks for the update. And okay, just a couple questions. First, when you, first I want to express support for the continued ongoing, if anything, we should probably double down on some of our mitigation measures that you've mentioned, given the rates we're seeing. If we get the percent positivity rate, it's about 5% right now in our state. I know locally, or hopefully we're lower, but it's high. And related to that, so you gave us some numbers at the beginning of the update about rates of vaccination, which I think are it's great news. Are those for specifically our school districts? Are they for the zip code overall? So is it specifically within the schools, or is it in the community as a whole? Is one of my questions. And then
I can do that one really quick. That's the zip code overall, which what we found in other ways is good proxy for the school district. In fact, it's often our school district's higher because there's a fair number of folks in our area more generally who have opted not to get vaccines, but also don't send their children to public school. Exactly. Yeah. So that's even better. And then the final question is, when we are talking about close contacts, is it, and I'm just thinking about this because I personally know a few families where one member has gotten COVID, and then fully vaccinated families, or families where a young child didn't have the ability to get vaccinated, and the entire family, even despite their vaccination status, have recently tested positive for COVID. So are we talking about close contact? And I remember this was a big thing when we were going over those documents in the summer, and it seems like ages ago, but the close contact kind of depended on the situation. So was it a kid you were unmasked eating lunch with versus a close family member? So are we making distinguishing between those, or is it a close contact across the board? So say my partner has COVID, I'm still allowed to go to school and do my functions because I'm vaccinated. And are we defining vaccinated now for our members as boosted, or is it just are we keeping that definition as 2 shots? Because I know, for example, UMass has just changed how they're defining fully vaccinated, and then in the next semester, it's going to be you need to have 2 shots plus a booster. So I'm just curious if that's it. Thank you. Sure. So boosters aren't available for this age group in terms of students to date. So that doesn't as much apply to the student. On the staff side, that's something that I think in the staff vaccine policy, there was reference to that. I did see Dr. Fauci say every day they're talking about changing that determination. I think that's likely to change from the federal level and probably not the far distant future. And I think then it can be re-engaged at the school committee level as it relates to staff. The close contact piece, there is a distinction between close contacts in school and close contacts not in school. So I think that is true. But in terms of close contacts not in school for fully vaccinated, you're right. They would have no symptoms. They'd be able to come. Household close contacts are a little bit different. And that's where the contact tracers ask lots of questions about the family's capacity to truly quarantine someone who tests positive and what the exposure of that person is. So that's where it gets gray, and it is situation dependent. You know, and there's no flow chart. It really depends on a whole range of factors. But, you know, what we're seeing is a lot of household spread. Like, you know, a lot of our positive cases, they look like there's more, but it ends up being siblings, you know, and we can't get into the details on that and how we communicate it, nor can I say more than I've already said here. But sometimes people say, oh, 2 cases at, you know, Martin Luther King School. I'm making up a school. It's not in our district. And you're like, oh, I wonder if they're connected. And, you know, in some ways it'd be nice to be able to say, oh, yeah, they're connected because they happen to have the same address, same parents or whatever. But that's not, you know, information we can share publicly. But we're certainly seeing the trend that you saw, regardless of vaccinations. I shouldn't say regardless. We're seeing a trend that, you know, families, you know, within households, it's quite contagious. I don't want to say regardless, because I think we are seeing a distinction between families with vaccinated families and families without in terms of the spread. It's quicker in one than the other, right? But it's like the line that's getting used a lot is, you know, there's people who are, well, I won't get into the details of that'll get us off topic. But yeah, no, does that answer your questions? Okay.
Any other questions on Dr. Morse? Mr. Demling?
Yeah, I mean, just a comment in regards to the relatively very low number of cases in our schools compared to other schools, and the still no cases of in-school spread. I mean, I don't think we can state enough how effective that is in a positive way by our relatively low community spread. You know, the fact that our community in all aspects has embraced vaccines and masks and other mitigation measures directly affects that. You know, and it's staff not coming in sick, it's parents accepting the very, you know, the difficulty of having their students stay home when they feel sick. And it's the colleges too. I was very critical of UMass last year of their practices with students. And now that we have UMass and Amherst College and Hampshire College all requiring boosters, you know, this is really one of those things where it takes a village, and we're very fortunate. Even in Massachusetts, there's a lot of places that are not doing very well right now, even in a deep blue state. And a lot of it is because of these culture clashes over vaccines and masks. And I'm just so appreciative of every individual's effort. Even if you aren't associated with schools at all, you know, the fact that you have embraced vaccines and these safety measures for the greater good is having a direct positive effect, and it's allowing our students to stay in school and be educated after you know what they went through last year. So I just big shout out of thanks to our local colleges and universities and community for you know, for keeping everybody safe.
Dr. Morris?
And I'll just do one more shout out because it's her last Amherst meeting, that Ms. Spitzer has been incredibly helpful in sharing information throughout the pandemic, you know, based on where you formerly worked and other places on health and safety. So I'll do more of a spiel next week, but I do want to note I don't think health and safety explicitly is on the agenda at the regional level, but it's been, you know, it's been a long 21 months. We're at 21 months yesterday from when we closed school. And, you know, I really appreciate having Carrie's organized, you know, a bunch of local doctors multiple times to do information sessions, both on vaccines early in the pandemic and more generally. And so, you know, just you will be sorely missed in terms of your connections to the medical community, and just even the articles you send me, you know, I always read them. They're always, you know, whether it's JAMA or other places, they always, you know, make me think differently and help me when I'm in conversations with public health officials to be more informed and know better questions to ask. So, you know, I've really enjoyed working with you in general. Again, I'll say more of that next week, but this particular topic has been such a strength that you've been able to bring to me and the committee. So I really thank your work. Thank you for your work on that.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions, then let's move on to next item, which is an update on the 6th grade move to the middle school, the process for that.
This one, I promise I'll be brief. Met with I think I might have shared with the committee last month that met with a number of educators connected to 6th grade on the curriculum day, which I think was November 2nd in the afternoon. A smaller group of educators has agreed to meet with me more regularly. We met, we came up, you know, a little bit on process, and then I met with the DNISCO group. And so really where we're starting our engagement is trying to get a vision for what the community, and we mean that broadly, has for what sixth grade would look like in the middle school. Because of the engagement from the MSBA process, we are starting, and not only, but intentionally, we're starting with students. So in January, Mary Kiley, our curriculum coordinator, and I will be visiting all the sixth grade classrooms to have our conversations with each about what would their vision be if they were in the middle school, sixth grade, like they are now, but in the middle school. What would they want? What would they want different? What would they want to keep? What are the traditions that are really important to them about sixth grade? And what are things that they would like to explore academically, socially, in terms of electives? And we'll repeat that same process with staff and the community in kind of when we get to March. But we want to give some space for the MSBA process engagement to happen and not overwhelm the community with so many requests for engagement. But all the questions, all the prompts have been written by sixth grade teachers. They've been fabulous. They're continuing to give us feedback. So I think as we get to kind of March, that's where you'll see more explicit engagement with the larger community on the sixth grade question. But really what we're trying to do, and the aim is to understand what is the vision? What are the kind of major aspects that folks in our community, students, staff, and families really want to think about in terms of sixth grade, and that can drive our future conversations on what the program looks like, instead of the program being, kind of originated in, what I think or Mary Kiley thinks or anything like that. We really wanted to come, and I think it's fitting that we're starting with students. We are also engaging the middle school. They have a student government, so we're going to be engaging the middle schoolers through the student government process that they already have. Probably a little bit after we engage the sixth grade students in January, which I think is it's happening the first 2 weeks in January. I think we're just scheduled the last one this afternoon. We also have engaged some at least 2 former principals of 6th through 8 middle schools, folks who are retired but can give us guidance throughout the process, can be kind of when we come up with ideas that we think are good, we can have a sounding board, and also can share what they felt like really worked in their 6th through 8 middle schools in similar communities, similar demographics to Amherst. So we'll try to get some expert voices in. But our goal really more broadly is to have kind of that vision piece defined before we get to the summer, and spend a lot of the summer with intensive work and facilitation from some outside folks like former principals, as well as our teachers, staff, and students, as well as families, to really define the programmatic aspects. But we really want to start on that vision piece because we feel like we have one shot at this. And if we go straight to the logistics, we're going to lose the kind of opportunity we have to really redefine 6th grade and how that fits into a 6 through 8 continuum of grades. So if it wasn't for the MSBA, we'd be planning all of this engagement in January and February, but we're making an intentional choice to delay this a little bit because we have that time. Thank you for agreeing to give us a little more time than we originally talked about for this process, and because we feel like waiting a month or 2 to have better engagement is better than rushing engagement and not getting the outcomes we want, which is broad community participation. So that's my update on 6th grade to middle school at the moment.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none. Good. Very thorough update. So next up, we have an interesting one: negotiate a new regional agreement. So this, I'll give a brief introduction. There's a better explanation of this in attachment in the agenda item. But as in our role on another committee, we participated in the Four Towns meeting, and during that meeting, the Amherst Town Council representatives indicated their request that the Amherst School Committee negotiate a new regional agreement for our regional school district and reference the charter. So from there, like I said, Dr. Morse drafted a memo for us to sort of frame our conversation, as well as a suggestion for how we might respond to the Amherst Town Council on this. So Dr. Morse, I know you've spoken with others in the town about this, so maybe you want to tee this up for us. You need to unmute.
Sorry, my button did not work. So if it's okay with you and the committee, I'd actually like to go through some of the key points, because I think I know I wrote it and shared it, but I actually think it's worth describing it in some detail to open up discussion. So one of the things that I wanted to do in talking with the town manager was to understand better the language in the charter. It struck me as interesting that the Amherst School Committee was asked to negotiate because the Amherst Committee typically doesn't have involvement on regional matters. Not typically, it doesn't, right? That's not its charge. So I did talk to district council about it, and he said it's atypical, but there's no legal reason why it couldn't happen that way. He did raise a number of other points. He's done this work before. He's in this process with another one of his communities. But I think there were some key points that he wanted to raise. One is the town charter has language that describes that the regional agreement should be updated related to the charter, and some of that has to do with technical parts of it. Says 4 towns, but it's not 4 towns anymore. It's 3 towns in 1 city. Some of those aspects. But what our district legal counsel was very clear on is, once it gets opened up, it's opened up. One town can't define how it gets opened. And, the towns make a decision to open up the regional agreement, and he thinks it's atypical and probably wouldn't happen where you wouldn't look at other parts, because I think my experience in another district is that there's many towns who have many concerns about the current regional agreement. So there's no way to pretend or to say, no, we're only going to open it for this. You decide to open it, and the chips fall where the chips fall. The second part is that as you know, the regional agreement is older than I am. I'll put it that way. And so laws have changed since then. And, it's an opportunity, perhaps spinning this positively, to look at the regional agreement, see if it's totally in compliance with current rules and laws, because eventually that process involves sending it to DESE and their legal team to review it. And it would have to, things that were sort of quote unquote grandfathered would not be grandfathered anymore into the regional agreement. Which brings me to the second point, which is his experience is a 3 to 5 year process. There's significant costs attached to the process, and he's really clear. I just want to be respectful of him. He's not looking for the work, right? It's not like he's doing this for profit. He's not advocating for this for profit, I should say. But he wanted to be really clear up front that this is not something that won't involve significant expense. My personal opinion is it's inappropriate for the Amherst public schools to pay this expense, because it's about something that does not have a direct connection with the Amherst public schools. So I think it'd be good to kind of understand that make sure the town council understands that it's a multi-year process. He shared that many communities start the process and don't complete it because they can't reach resolution with the member towns, and the bills are piling up, and people say, well, are we really going to get anywhere, or is it better to stay in our current situation? There is examples like Framingham of other communities where it changed from a town to a city, and they're not part of a region, but the Voc Tech is. So there are some other examples out there of this. He asked me, things problematic now as it relates to the regional agreement, and that Amherst is considered a town in the regional agreement. And my answer is I have not experienced any tension in that. While the language isn't fully accurate, I haven't remembered any of the towns bringing that up as a point of contention. The next point he raised is that you would potentially be unaware of the town council's desires in such a negotiation. Because if we're extending beyond what the charter states, which is just to update the technical terms, I'm not sure how comfortable you all feel advocating for the town of Amherst in a regional agreement for the secondary schools. But I think there's a real question of whether the town council really wants to cede all of its control of the process to you all. And if they do, I think it'd be good for them to say that explicitly. And whether you want to take that on, I think, I'm an arbiter of all 4 towns, as you know, so it's not me playing favorites, and I have to be really cautious about that. But I know we're at an Amherst School Committee meeting, so I'm trying to keep my Amherst only hat on. But I think it is a little bit of a complicated thing for you all to advocate or negotiate on behalf of the town, because you're also regional school committee members. You have a responsibility to that district as well. And it's not technically a conflict of interest. Mark checked for us, but it is something to be aware of in terms of any negotiation or advocacy. So when we ended the conversation, the attorney's advice was, well, let the town council know these things and see what they want to do instead of trying to make a decision for the town council. And so I drafted a letter that I just summarized in the last 5 minutes with these points for your consideration. Certainly, you don't have to send it. You could communicate a number of other ways or dislike this letter and want to make edits. But I tried to support you all by drafting that at least for a conversation point tonight, so that the town council knows that we are looking into this and that there are some real questions that need to be answered before we can move forward or opt to move forward in this domain. So with that, I'll turn it over to the committee.
Can I start with one? I don't know if this is a clarifying question, but so we've been requested to do this. Is it within our scope to say no? That this is, I mean, sorry to be blunt, and I saw a chuckle, but I mean, if we, like, are we able to say, well, we're Amherst School Committee, our purview is the Amherst Elementary School District as a body, and so we don't see that this is within our scope and priorities. I'm just asking. I'm not saying necessarily that that's where I'm going, but it's like we're saying, like, oh, if you really want to do this, okay, we'll do that, is kind of what this draft sort of suggests. And I just want to ask the question, are we required to? Are we able to say no?
So technically the charter is consistent, like you have to treat it like it's state law. It's been vetted by the state. So I think if you wanted to add a line about feeling uncomfortable moving forward, that certainly would be, or you want to talk about alternate arrangements because you feel uncomfortable, I think that would be something you'd certainly put in. I would not, based on the advice I got, I would not recommend rejecting that, because I think we have to take the charter as consistent with state law, and someone approved this, whether it was a good idea or a bad idea, at the state level, I don't know, but I don't mean to be flip about it, but I don't think, I wouldn't advise you to say that you wouldn't do it, because I think you really need to. If the town council asked you to do it, I think, the points I raised in the draft, which again are very open to, edits or just for your consideration, are points of clarification. I want to be really clear. I try to be really careful in writing this neutrally. I'm not trying to suggest to the town council or the folks who came up with the charter that they're wrong. I think there's just additional considerations that need to be hammered out before the town decides what it'd like to do. And I think it was a surprise to me how long and how expensive these processes are. I do not have experience. I was not around in 1950 something when this was drafted. So I did not have experience about redoing regional agreements. So 3 to 5 years was way beyond my expectation to be in the conversation, but that is typical. And again, we have, our attorney has experience doing this very thing. It's a tremendous amount of time, to your point, Ms. McDonald, that whoever's kind of on charge with this, probably wouldn't be the full committee, probably be a subcommittee of this committee would do. It's, some of you were on or connected to regionalization efforts before. It's an incredible amount of time and energy and effort, especially with the 4 towns involved. So I don't want to minimize that, but I also don't think you have the ability to say, no, we're not going to do it.
Got it. Mr. Demling?
So this was exactly my question. So said in a different way, do we have a choice? And so I still think it's an open question though, Dr. Morrison. I'm not trying to argue with you in terms of like my legal opinion versus your legal opinion, but that's just the point, is that you're not a lawyer and I'm not a lawyer. And so I don't question the fact that the town charter is legal and that it was reviewed by council. I'm not questioning that. But to me, it all centers around this phrase: the Amherst School Committee shall negotiate an amendment to the existing region. And so to me, the first thing to do is to ask I guess it would be the Amherst. So we could ask our council, not the COUNSEL, and we could ask the town council CIL to ask their council SEL, if I got all those spellings correctly, to get the lawyers to clarify, does the school committee have a choice to shall negotiate? Because that sort of that answers the first point of what might be our deliberation is, do we want to do this? I also want to say, as a sidebar, I'm trying to be really careful not to speak from a regional point of view here. We have a quorum of the regional school committee here right now, and we don't have a regional school committee meeting called. So the 5 of us have to be very careful as we're commenting on this, that we're not talking about what we think is best for the region or any other discussion that might involve regional members. So as to what this proposed letter commits us to, I actually read it that it didn't really commit us to going forward with it. The last line is, given these factors, we wanted to confirm that the Amherst Town Council is ceding control of the process. So if, let's say hypothetically, they say, yes, we are ceding control of the process to you. And let's say we have a choice or not, we could say, okay, we thank you for control of the process. We're deciding not to do it. That's it. Or we attempt to negotiate. So because it says negotiate, it doesn't say successfully negotiate. It says negotiate, right? So we could say, hey, other 3 towns, we would just like to update the wording of this so that, we get what the intent of this was done and not do anything else. And they could say, well, no, we're not all right with that. We could say, all right, well, that's an impasse and we've done our charge. So I just think legally we don't have 100.0% clarity on the charge here.
Dr. Morris?
Yep, and certainly, whether you through the chair want to connect with our district's council, you're welcome to. I did get what I felt like was clarity that unless the town council comes back with some alternative, that you do have to attempt to negotiate. I think your latter point is a potential outcome where there's an attempt to negotiate with the other towns. The other towns want to bring up other things. I think my sense is you all would be ill-prepared to discuss other items in the regional agreement and on the behalf of Amherst, and I don't think the town council would want to do that anyway, right? Because I think, you, as you noted, you'd have competing interests going on. But my sense from legal counsel is that sans different direction from the Amherst Town Council, an attempt to negotiate should occur based on the language in the town charter. So, but to your point, you can't force people to. It's a negotiation. You don't have the ability to force any towns to do anything they don't want to do. Right? You all sit on different districts and become acutely aware of that in your time in these districts on a whole variety of levels. But I don't think not attempting it was the advice that I received from legal counsel.
So staying a little bit on this topic is to open it up. And I mean, I guess it's probably written in the regional agreement itself, and I didn't, full confession, did not go back and read it with a fine-tooth comb. So maybe the answer's in there. But can one town literally open it up and force the other towns to open up negotiation on the regional agreement, or do all 4 members have to agree to open it up? So if Amherst were to say, hey, we want to renegotiate it, and the 3 others said no, it takes all 4. Is that, I saw some nodding heads. So
that is my understanding, and you need all 4 towns not only to agree to negotiate, but agree to a tentative agreement, agree to a redrafting, agree to send it to DESE, before the DESE piece, agree to support it for the other 3 towns, not Amherst, at their town meeting. It would have to pass their town meetings, then go to DESE and DESE legal for approval. And that's why this process is a 3 to 5 year process. So
my related question to what Mr. Dillman brought up, which is that this committee is also a quorum of another committee who I just find it, yes, I understand this is what the charter says, which we need to treat as law, but how can we represent one member town in a negotiation when we are a quorum of the body that we're negotiating about. Like that it just seems like we're just not able to do that in a good faith way. But Dr. Morris?
So I raised the same point, and I think if this was really to play out as the charter states, you'd probably have to post every meeting on this topic as a joint meeting of Amherst and region, and invite the regional school committee reps so that you could speak from a regional point of view. That is, to me, I don't want to speak for any of you, to me, be very, very awkward. And, you know, I would be concerned about it compromising the relationship on the regional school committee, since I'm not bound by OML in the same way. I'm going to say something that I know you all can't comment on, but it has a potential of compromising the relationships between the representatives from the 4 towns on a different committee. So I have that concern. Legal counsel said it'd be allowable, super duper awkward, and very messy with postings and invitations. But the Amherst School Committee couldn't really meet without its inviting the regional representatives to any meetings, even if it was advocating on behalf of the town of Amherst, because it does compromise a quorum of the regional school committee. You'd be talking about a regional item. So that's how it would have to play out. Very, very awkward, but it is legally permissible.
Mr. Demling.
All right, I'm just throwing logs on the fire at this point. So another thing that I just realized as I was reading through the details here, and I only know this because I chaired the Regional School District Planning Board between our committee and, I'm sorry, it wasn't technically between our committee, but it was this exploration of should we merge the Amherst Elementary District and the Pelham Elementary District. Is that, so there's this line, there may be other areas of the agreement that need vetting by legal counsel to update them to be compliant with current regulations. It's actually more accurate that like there definitely would be things, there would be major components of our regional agreement that would have to be updated specifically because it would be reviewed by DESE legal counsel. And so for example, one of the most prominent ones is representation. So Amherst has 5 of the 9 members on the region, right? 55% of the vote. Everybody has 1 vote in our region. We have over 80% of the enrollment in the region. That is out of compliance with current Mass General Law. This 1 person, 1 vote idea that, and I'm oversimplifying here because there's exceptions, but basically the votes that a member town has to be within 10% proportional to your enrollment, right? So even if everybody agrees to it, you couldn't create a region today like we have constituted. Same thing for Pelham. Pelham has 22% of the representation on the region. When DESE's legal counsel reviewed that, even if it was just for wordsmithing, you know, City of Amherst, they would say, well, okay, this doesn't jive because it's 22% representation. Pelham isn't within 10% of that. So there would be, it's not just things that people might want to, even if everybody wanted to avoid it and just wanted to be play nice, you know, so to speak, and say, okay, let's just do this technical update the town of Amherst wants, we couldn't do it. And so it would throw us into this whole other process, unavoidable process of really restructuring the whole, the entire, and then you get into how do you vote and multiple towns voting. Anyway, I won't go there, but it's something that would be unavoidable, which doesn't totally come across in this point here, but it's something we could, you know, talk about with the town council if we wanted to. The last thing I wanted to say, because I see Chair Griesmer from the Amherst Town Council is here viewing the meeting. I don't want this to be contentious at all with the Amherst Town Council. I feel like we have a very positive working relationship with the Amherst Town Council. We have a lot of intense things that we coordinate on, you know, budget, COVID, whatnot. And I don't want to give the impression, and I don't think this letter does, but I just don't want to give the impression that we are, you know, digging our feet in and making a decision not to play nice, not to do what are legally required. It's just that this is a very complicated legal issue when you dig into it, in terms of what the process has to be. And you know, we're just trying to work it out so we can do what the right thing to do is.
Just to clarify, this is a draft, and so if we want to make edits to this letter, so I think your suggestion is my personal opinion, is a good one to consider editing or revising that particular section. Ms. Spitzer.
So it's been 3 or 4 town meetings, or 4 years that I've been on the 4 town meetings, and this keeps coming up. And I think we have raised some of these concerns in the past. So I just believe, not that I don't agree with all of the points that we're raising, I do, but I also believe that council, I have a feeling, understands what they very clearly asked for at the meeting, the 4 towns meeting. So I think we should also think about what we want to ask for and support for the situation in which we actually need to move forward with this. Just the thing I'm most concerned about is the resources, particularly at a time when we are going to be trying to move forward with the school building project. So not so much of the resources of the money, although, you know, I'm hearing from Dr. Morris that the legal costs of this would be quite significant. And I do feel, especially in the current environment where, you know, I'm optimistic about the budget outcome, but we don't know. But every year, you know, we've had to make cuts, and I'd hate to have to cut school services in support of updating the agreement to reflect the technicalities, as I see it, about the town of Amherst, and potentially, you know, opening up all of the other, you know, this is a Pandora's box, and all of these things will have trickle-down effects. But one of them that seems most relevant to me is the budgetary concerns, and also the strain it would put on our resources for kind of dealing with all of the issues that Mr. Demling just raised in terms of representation. Like, these are going to eat up not only the resources of the school committee, but the communities that we're trying to engage with around the school building process and the move of the 5th grade, the 6th grade to the middle school, and just COVID pandemic education stuff. So I think, I understand. I think we should confirm, and we should get as much clarity as possible about exactly what the council is asking of the committee. But I think it's it seems pretty clear to me that they've stated this multiple times, and that I think they've also been at some of these meetings where some of these issues that we have been discussing have been raised. So not the full council necessarily. So hopefully this letter will kind of clearly lay out all of these issues, but I think we need to be prepared to move forward and ask for the support that we would need. And maybe that's asking for delay, maybe it's asking for additional funds. Maybe it's asking for project management for what sounds like it could be a multi-year and really difficult process.
Dr. Morris?
Yeah, so if we could transition to next steps. I mean, Ms. Lord or Mr. Harrington want to jump in, they certainly can, but you know, perhaps it makes sense, Ms. McDonald, for me or you just to accept feedback on the letter or potential edits. Because what I hear from the committee, if I'm hearing correctly, is there's general support for communicating with the Amherst Town Council, but there may be some revisions that the committee wants to pursue. I do think, because they've been asking about it for a while, I do think it makes sense to try to respond in a timely fashion to them, and they're sort of having their own transition, much like on the school committee, a couple of weeks from now. So I don't know how people feel about that, of keeping sort of like the core template of the letter, but adding the pieces that individuals describe. I don't know how you feel that, Ms. McDonald. We haven't talked about.
No, I would think that's a great next step. I feel, you know, to just summarize what I'm hearing, if folks are okay, and I summarize this correctly or accurately, if you're okay, I'd be happy to sort of work with you, Dr. Morris, to make these edits and send it on to the town council. But what I'm hearing is primarily in that first bullet, to be clear that there are areas, not may be areas, that need updating to be compliant. It might be helpful to name specific ones because they're not simple to Dr. Mr. Demling's, I just made you a doctor, Mr. Demling. To Mr. Demling's comment, the idea of representation is not a simple technicality for discussion. So that might help it to sort of include that to sort of give an idea of how complex this may end up being, or could end up being. And then to Ms. Spitzer's comment about the legal expenses, maybe sort of be a little bit more clear about actually requesting support for this, that this become, if this is the case, sort of being a little bit more clear about saying we will need help, not asking if they're open for helping, but just being very clear. Because I think also it's not just, Ms. Spitzer raised a really good point, it's not just the committee, it's also the district staff that supports the committee. It would be on that staff, and as we know, we're pretty tight, and pretty lean there, and so support both in terms of budget and personnel, actual personnel hours, I think is something that we could weave in. Is that sort of, I'm seeing some head nodding of folks. Okay. Again, thumbs up, head nod that you're okay with sort of my working with Dr. Morris to make these revisions and get this sent over to the town council. Okay. Great. Mr. Demling.
Per our policy, I move to extend our meeting by 30 minutes.
Moved by Demling, and I'll second that by McDonald. Is there any discussion? Actually, I don't know if there is discussion on that one. I think we just go to a vote.
You can. It's just a regular motion.
Any discussion? Seeing none, move to a roll call vote. Mr. Demling?
Demling, aye.
Mr. Harrington?
Harrington, aye.
Ms. Lord?
Lord, aye.
Ms. Spitzer?
Spitzer, aye.
And McDonald, aye. Thank you. So we are extended till 9:35. Next up, ESSER funding plan update. And there are two documents. There's a PDF that's really difficult to read in an Excel. If folks want to have download that file to see that. So that is an update.
Yep, and I thought maybe I'd just go down and describe the color coding and a little bit of that, if that's okay.
That'd be great.
Yep, and I'm conscious of Mr. Demling's motion that got made because of time, so I will try to be as succinct as I can be. So the green color coding are areas where the spending has already started or commenced. The ones that are still in kind of white background are where they have not. And actually, I just want to stress and really focus on the areas where there has not been spending to date and describe those in a little bit of detail because, it's been a couple months and we wanted to update you all. So compensatory services for special ed, those typically happen during summer months. Students are already in school for a long school day. These are compensatory services or for services that weren't delivered during the time when we were in pandemic mode of virtual school. So that often looks like extended school year, things like that. And we'll see that spent more readily next summer. So that's why that is still in white. Contracted services that provide bridge staffing until permanent staff are hired or needs diminish. At this point, we've been able to fulfill our staffing needs without needing to do that through thanks to the good work of HR. We don't know if that'll continue. Staff, like we're not immune from the national trend of some staff make different decisions. A number of people choose to move. It's been actually amazing to watch the number of people, both in my professional and personal life, who have chosen the pandemic as a time to change where they are living. And often that changes with a job along with it. So we're not immune from that, but to date, we have not needed to access that. The mentors, counselors for self-identified staff outside the EAP, mental wellness activities. We actually have started that more recently. We started the community of care, which is couple people, Doreen Cunningham, Debbie Westmoreland's involved, Katie Richardson, where they're creating care baskets for folks who are really struggling. I don't feel right reading some of the thank yous we've gotten for that, but it's been incredibly meaningful for folks. But since that spending started just in the last couple of weeks, it hasn't caught up with the appropriation of the funds hasn't all looped back, but that funding has started. But at the time this was put together, that community care group that is really looking to support staff members, like there's 15 baskets that are made and going out in the next before the break, because a lot of people are struggling with a lot of different things. It's a way to support staff morale. And I do want to say principals have found funds in their own budgets. I know that many principals, all the principals actually have hosted events for their staff where they are work-free discussion zones where there's, this time of year, it's like hot chocolate and that sort of thing in the afternoon, but just opportunities for staff to gather outside and be connected and not have to always be a work meeting because we know how valuable that's been. So that kudos to Crocker Farm. They got us started earlier in the fall with that. And like many of the good ideas that come in one of our schools, all of our schools are emulating that, and all 3 elementary schools have participated in that. But they have funds for that at the school level. So that will be turning green once our accounting system turns over because of the community care program that Doreen, Deb, and Katie have put together. The interpreters to meet with students before the work with them for the first time. So that was approved beyond the point at which we could actionably do that this year, but with the change in the semester coming at the secondary level, we may have some change in the interpreter assignments. So we may be able to spend some of that, but that's likely to be funds that are expended next summer, right before the school year starts. The additional HVAC staff. We would love to have additional HVAC staff. We've posted for additional HVAC staff, but like many other areas and in other domains, we are still in the place of hiring. So if we do get the right person, we know that that's in the queue. We have a much more full complement of facility staff than we did at the beginning of the school year, where we had multiple key positions where we were looking for people unfilled. That's not just in transportation, that's in other areas of our facilities team as well. And we are moving closer to being fully staffed, and then can hopefully find HVAC folks who are willing to join us. But the competition on the private market is very, very challenging for any public employer as it relates to HVAC. So we will continue to search for that as we can. Misting, fogging, and other sanitizing machines we have on there. Our supply has been fine, so we have not yet needed to expend that on additional tools in that area. Sanitizing training, we did that. We haven't had enough new staff come on where we need to redo that training, but that will be coming as more staff are hired. So as you can see, one of the things to note is that thanks to our state representative, Mindy Dom, we had an earmark this year that supports our BRIGHT program to do professional development for our staff about working with students and the mental health needs and social emotional learning throughout the year. So we have not needed to expend as much funds from the grant for that because of the state earmark that Representative Dome received vouched for us for and delivered on. So thank you for Representative Dome that provides that funding for future years. And the last one note at the bottom is that, as you know, and this is going to come up, I think it's either January, February, I believe the January Amherst School Committee will be talking about the process that's underway around finding a new math curriculum that better meets the needs of our students and staff. And so we are planning to purchase that curriculum coming from the ESSER funds, which is an allowable expense about accelerating learning. And so while that money hasn't been spent yet, there is sort of an internal earmark that we know that is an expensive purchase that we frankly couldn't afford with the current how much we appropriate for curriculum supplies. So we do plan to use ESSER funds for that, and that's a sizable chunk will be spent on that in the next 6 to 10 months. So that is as quick as I could offer this report, and see if anyone has questions that I could help with.
Questions? Mr. Denman?
So the 2 biggest items on this that are color coded, so they're either in process or ongoing, are the outdoor materials and resources, and for 150 and the 200,000 for additional staffing to accommodate students with high levels of social emotional needs. Can you just talk about how that funding level is going so far? Obviously, those were estimates, not exact PO, bills. And what impact you see that it's having so far? Just because those are the biggest, those are the top two items on the list.
Yeah, so if you went to our elementary schools and went behind them right now, you'd see a plethora of tents. They probably have a shelf life for this current season of 1.5 weeks. I'm looking at Mr. Harrington a little bit, but I'm guessing that's about good. We've been fortunate to have a mild late fall season, and they're used all the time. So our students are outside every day, not just for lunch, and they are using the outdoor tent areas routinely. So it is directly contributing to students being outside more often. I think thanks to the good work of our facilities department, we still have the big tents from last year, but we got smaller tents that didn't require the same degree of approval that the big tents did, and they therefore are more flexible in terms of use and where they can be located. We do have also purchased more benches and outdoor seating areas that also are used on a day like today, which was a pretty pleasant day for December for sure. Just look out the back, you can see Wildwood, and students are outside all the time, throughout the day. Obviously, as it gets colder, the tents are going to have to come down in the next couple of weeks before we get a snowstorm, and some of those will have to move inside. But that's been a huge success. I do feel like our students have been outside more often, and even frankly more often in some ways at the beginning of the school year where we didn't have all of those things in place. So again, big props to the facilities department for finding good products, getting them ordered, getting them actually delivered, which is a challenge with supply chain issues, and installed in places, and working with principals on that. The other one you mentioned was, I believe, the additional staffing to accommodate students with higher levels of social emotional and emotion. Yeah, so we are utilizing that. I know at some of our schools, we have retired school adjustment counselors who are coming in to support the varied needs of students. And that's been successful. We also are seeing there to be a need on the academic front for students. So we are supporting them with additional personnel as needed. So I think that one's harder to quantify, and it also gets into, much like I talked about, the HVAC position filling staffing roles, particularly temporary staffing roles, has never been more challenging in my 21 years in the district. And so sometimes we have the needs, and sometimes it's harder to find the person with the right skill set. These aren't easy jobs, much like the HVAC. They're not jobs that people can casually walk into. They need background experience to be successful in them. So I think on that one, we're less accelerated financially in terms of spending, but the spending we're doing is having a direct impact on students.
Any other questions? No? Great. Thank you, Dr. Morris, for the update, and to the team for preparing it. Next up is our class size report. So this is following up. In September, we had an enrollment report, or maybe it might have even been August. It was, I think, September. And so this is connected to that, and just reporting out what our average class sizes are in each of our elementary schools. So the report is attached to the agenda item. And Dr. Morris, I don't know if there was anything you wanted to describe in this for us.
Yeah, I think the only thing it's worth noting is in all of our schools, you'll see that, we're often between 2 and 3 sections, and the times where we have 3 sections tend to be smaller classes, and the times where we have 2 sections tend to be larger class size. The starred ones are asterisks or cominantes, and you can see in 2nd grade, it looks like we have very low class size, which is true, but we ended up with a very awkward number of non-cominante students based on, just students moving to our area. And, there wasn't a great solution to that either. We were going to have, extremely large classes, much larger than the cominantes, or we were going to have, 2 very small classes. And I think it really gets to the larger benefit when we do get to the consolidation and the building project does happen. So to Mr. Demling, Ms. Spitzer's points from an hour ago, it will make lots of things smoother, and we'll be able to smooth our enrollments in ways that we're not now. We are not able to be as efficient as we'd like. And you know, the upside of being inefficient is you often have really low class sizes, which is great for students and staff. It's not great for our budget. And if we were comfortable with larger class sizes in Amherst, we would probably not have as many sections. I mean, certainly we wouldn't have as many sections. But that's been a priority of this committee. It's been a priority of this community. And we get into a lot of in-between areas between 2 and 3 classes. And I anticipate that'll continue. And you know, I think will be one of the upsides for Crocker Farm when the consolidation happens is we'll be able to be a lot more efficient, because that's a school where we often struggle between 2 and 3 classes. Some of you were parents at Crocker Farm and experienced that directly in your kids' experience. And I think we'll be able to normalize numerically class size there in a much better way than we are now. But that's 4 or 5 years from now. So we're going to still have to push through and work through that. As budget gets tighter, we will have to have conversations about some of these tweener classes, low class size versus what we can afford. And there may be a delta between those two items. And I think I'm glad we're doing this report now, because when we get into budget season, which is not very far away, we're going to have some really honest, blunt conversations about what are we able to do and what are the impacts on that. We got some feedback at our budget forum about, not to go too far astray of the agenda item, about that. If we'd made different decisions last year and had class sizes of 23, 24 across the board, I imagine there would have been some real concerns about those class sizes. We would have heard that at the budget forum as well. So there are some forced choices and fixed realities for us, and class size is one of them. And certainly some communities go different directions than this committee and the community have on class size. And I think the report highlights that, you know, when we're in those kind of betweener areas, it's hard. And our district has a fair amount of transiency in and out throughout the school year, more than most communities in our area. And it makes it sometimes hard to predict what enrollments will be year to year. We have more in and more out than most communities, just because of the nature of Amherst, the nature of the universities, and folks who maybe have more transient jobs where they may, you know, be more inclined to go up and move to University of Minnesota or some other place, and vice versa. People who come in mid-academic career for their children than many communities. So it's hard to predict. We give NSDAQ and all those places a run for their money when they're trying to do predictions for our district because of that. And we try to make the best choices we can for the students given the fiscal realities we have. So I think that's just the gestalt of what gets highlighted in this report for me.
Yeah, it's interesting because I noticed that second grade at Fort River as well. So presumably, if the average class size is 15, and there's 4 classrooms, that at least one of a couple of the classrooms are much smaller than 15. Is that
right? So when you have, you know, let's say for sake of argument, 26 kids and registered for a non-commandante section, you don't have a lot of great options. Right. So the option we did is the more expensive option, which is having 2 very, very small classes. The Commandantes ones are more typically sized than the English, 100% English option. But there's not a great, unless we're comfortable with class sizes of 25 or 26, which are outside the target that the school committee has, you end up with wonderful experience for kids, but incredibly inefficient fiscal decisions that we made, but we couldn't come up with other options. We're not interested in busing. You sort of don't really save money if you create complex busing systems or van systems that get kids to other schools. You think you're solving one problem, but then all of a sudden you need a van and a driver, and you've saved no money and upset lots of people. So our current system is very inefficient that way. And that grade level Commandantes, we started very small. That was the first year of Commandantes. So those English section started very small, but it grew much more quickly than any other grade or class that we had, which is there's, you know, the randomized experience, right? Kids don't come equally represented or distributed across the grade levels when they move to our town. And we just had a cluster of kids move in that grade level. And we did the best we could with it, but it's, again, great experience for kids to have classes. Those classes are well under 15, but it has bottom line impact on our budget.
any questions? Mr. Demling?
Yeah, so point well taken about the challenges of presenting this data if you're not familiar with all of the context points that you just brought up, Dr. Morris, about why these numbers can fluctuate and vary. And also point very well taken about how the school building project also helps us address that efficiency. It's not something we talk a lot about when we have the item of the school building project up. But that being said, I'm happy we have this on here because I think it's a good reminder that we should be promoting this more, especially when we talk about budget, because we don't have to have, as you mentioned a couple times, we don't have to have the class sizes that we do. And it's very common in Massachusetts, especially for the older grades listed here, to have 25 plus, and not uncommon to have 30 plus with one teacher, without a co-teacher, and without an aide in the classroom. This is in number one in education, Massachusetts, right? And we decide as a community value to fund our schools so that we can have these low class sizes, so that we can have more staff time per student. That's a core value of what we invest in. So when you look at things like per pupil spending, when you look at why is staffing expensive, when you look at those things, this is fundamentally a big part of it. There's obviously other things we value in our schools that we invest in, but this is a big piece. And it's easier to see, I think, at the elementary level than this is even more complicated class size to talk about the region. But it's something I think we should take pride in. It's a point of value that we invest, and so I'm glad that it has this visibility here, and I would encourage us to talk about it more, particularly in budget season.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because actually we should be, and because of all the goings on and sort of intensity of our focus in other areas last year, we did not get to this. So this is something that we actually by policy need to be looking at. I think it's at least once a year, if not twice a year, is what we're asked to do this. So that's why it's being brought here. And you're absolutely right, Mr. Demling, as an input and part of our budget process in the spring is to look at what that was sort of the basis for our budget is. What is that projected enrollment and class sizes? So yes, +1 on that. I think I'll also note that I not only should we be proud of it, but I think it also, those small class sizes, particularly in elementary, makes an attractive district for teaching as well. I think, it's sort of valuing that relationship and that high teacher to student ratio really, I think, does help us bring in the top quality talent that we have in our schools. Dr. Morris?
Yeah, I think the other thing to keep in mind with some of the small classes is we're still in a COVID environment where we're still distancing. Desks are still 3 feet apart. It's not like where we were with 6 feet, but it's, I think, there's plenty of schools that have large classes that just don't get to 3 feet, right, in our state, and so our priority was the health and safety piece. And so we did err on the side of smaller classes in some ways this year, not only because of the factors I mentioned, but, we didn't know what the year was going to look like. And honestly, right now, I'm really glad that we're able to distance 3 feet comfortably in all of our classes. Now at Fort River and Wildwood, that's less of an issue, except for a couple of rooms that are not in the formerly quad areas. But at Crocker Farm, those rooms, they're not huge rooms, especially with where they decided to put the coat area. Sorry, I won't vent about that, but it's something that is, if you talk to a Crocker Farm teacher, they would certainly vent about it, how much real estate gets taken inside the class for that. And so when we look at Crocker Farm, we have to be very conscious of that. We are distancing, and it really does make a difference if there's room for teachers to actually have their instructional materials and their students at distance. So I think it's an additional variable this year that can't be forgotten.
Really good point. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? No? Okay. Moving along to future agenda planning. Our next meeting is January 11th, 2022. And we'll be welcoming 2 new members after saying goodbye to 2 members tonight. And so first up on that agenda is reorganization. And just as a reminder, when we reorganize, Dr. Morris is temporarily our chair. So he'll be opening the meeting on that evening. Tentatively, we also have on deck continued safety and health updates, building committee updates, including, I think tentatively we're hoping to have the initial ed plan review at that one. Charter school cost accounting discussion, because this has come up several times in budget forums, budget presentations and discussions. So want to sort of dig deep into that and also understand sort of how the town of Amherst manages that. And then math curriculum review update. So as a reminder, that is one of superintendent goals for this year is to look at the math curriculum and ensure that, or for opportunities to align it with the new curriculum that we've put in place in our other district secondary schools. Ms. Lord.
I apologize. I know this isn't actually at all future agenda planning, and I missed it earlier because I could not reconcile the truth. This is my last meeting with the Amherst School Committee, but I will be reaching out to each of you personally, and it has been my great honor to serve with you, and thank you.
Thank you. Right back at you both. Warrant report. I do have some warrants to report and I have to find them. I have 4, so I'll start with the where is it? Oh, there it is. Sorry, it wasn't showing up. I, Allison McDonald, authorized by my signature payroll in the amount of $791,440.81, dated November 17th, 2021, and I signed that on December 1st, 2021. I, Alice McDonald, authorized by my signature payables in the amount of $118,373.35 for a warrant dated December 1st, 2021. This includes general fund expenses of $51,376.15, revolving fund expenses of $200, grant fund expenses of $32,548.92, miscellaneous for $195.33, a gift in the amount of $309.30, Article 22 funds in the amount of $11,900, and Article 20 funds of $21,843.65. I signed that on December 1st, 2021. I, Allison McDonald, authorized by my signature to payables. I authorized payroll in the amount of $768,373.94, dated December 15th, 2021, and I signed that on December 13th, 2021. And last, and I think least, if I recall, yes, this one I signed, I authorized payroll in the amount of -$50, dated November 17th, 2021, and I signed that on December 13th, 2021. And now I lost you. There you are. And we do have some gifts, which are up next. I move that we accept the following gift from Martha Ulver, number 996192, to support Crocker Farm at the principal's discretion in the amount of $10. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by McDonald, seconded by Spitzer. And any discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Demling?
Demling, aye.
Mr. Harrington?
Harrington, aye.
Ms. Spitzer?
Spitzer, aye.
Ms. Lord?
Lord, aye.
And McDonald, aye. The motion passed unanimously. And now I'm going to look to Ms. Lord to make a motion.
I move that we adjourn the Amherst School Committee. My last one at this moment.
Second.
Moved by Lord and seconded by Spitzer. There's no discussion. We'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Demling?
Demling, aye.
Mr. Harrington?
Harrington, aye.
Ms. Lord?
Lord, aye.
Ms. Spitzer?
Spitzer, aye.
And McDonald, aye. We are adjourned, and thank you again, both of you, for your service on the Amherst School Committee.
Night.
Good night.